Chapter 227. Behind a barren hillside, hundreds of men in black suddenly appeared. They immediately formed a battle formation and guarded the surroundings. Their movements were quite well trained, and their cooperation was quite tacit. Yu Qianzhou was dressed in black, but he did not cover his face like the others. Only Guan Yu, who was sitting on the horse, was still dressed in a green robe. The wind whistled. Yu Qianzhou looked around. This was the location he had chosen when he was scouting. From a tactical point of view, this place was more suitable for gathering troops than the Spirit Stone mine not far away. Moreover, it was the most suitable place for so many people to advance stealthily. "Follow me in a row." Yu Qianzhou shouted softly. A flying sword gently lifted him up, and he flew along the undulating mountain range. A row of people followed closely behind, all of them moving forward while staying a little above the ground. Guan Yu waved his hand, and the rest of the people quickly dispersed in groups. Only 3 company commanders were left by his side. Yu Qianzhou brought more than 30 people to a call and hid. Anquangsung's Spirit Stone mine was at the bottom of a slope in front of them. They could already hear the shouts of the people inside. If they showed their heads now, they would definitely be discovered by the people on the high ground. He needed to wait for the others to surround the Spirit Stone mine within the stipulated time. Then, he would launch a sudden attack. At that time, even if the other party discovered them, it would not be much of a problem. It would be enough to catch them off guard. There were no unusual movements in the surroundings. Obviously, the other people's encirclement had not been discovered by Anquangsung's people. At this time, if someone looked down from the sky, they would see that there were hundreds of black shadows surrounding the Spirit Stone mine. In fact, this method was not very safe. The safest way would be to suddenly appear in the Spirit Stone mine and quickly launch a surprise attack. But the key was that when Yu Qianzhou came to investigate, there was no way to enter the mine. He could only secretly observe from the periphery. He could not run in and leave a positioning mark in a suitable place for everyone to appear instantly. Because Yu Qianzhou had the golden pearl, if he controlled his breathing and remained motionless, it was estimated that no one would be able to discover him. However, if he were to sneak in, there would inevitably be some movement. With his cultivation, it would be very difficult to hide from the nascent soul experts inside. Estimating that it was about time, Yu Qianzhou made a ready gesture to everyone. One of his hands made a gesture of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everyone stared at the movements of his hands, and the flying sword in their hands was ready. When the last finger was flicked, Yu Qianzhou took the lead and fiercely flew out of the call on his sword. The 30 or so people below him all flew out in a flash. Yu Qianzhou's mind moved. His fingers pointed to a tall wooden building in front of him. Hundreds of flying swords suddenly appeared around him. Xiao xiao. They shot out like a storm. On the wooden building, there were 2 disciples of Foundation Establishment stage leaning on it and watching the scenery with boredom. Although their duty was to observe the surrounding situation and prevent sudden danger, no one would think that robbing the Spirit Stone mine would happen easily. After all, Anquangsung was not an ordinary sect. The Magic Illusion Palace was an example. When they heard the sound and turned around to find the hundreds of cold lights, it was too late. The flying swords were as fast as lightning. The speed of the flying swords was Yu Qianzhou's forte. It was suitable for a sneak attack. Puff puff puff. The hundreds of flying swords smashed the wooden building on the high road. A few puffs of blood exploded and limbs fell. The hundreds of flying swords quickly returned to Yu Qianzhou's side like locusts, protecting his body. More than 30 people quickly flew over the collapsed wooden building. Yu Qianzhou pointed the sword in his hand at a cave. The information provided by the Enchantress of 100 Charms proved that it was the place where the communication array was set up. The dozens of people shot over at their fastest speed. In the meantime, a few Anquangsung disciples ran over. However, they were unable to block the fierce attack led by the nascent soul stage black-clothed members. With a single blow, several people were already dismembered. Just as a few people stuck their heads out of the cave to see what was going on outside, dozens of people each took out a spirit talisman and threw it in. A series of loud crackling sounds came from inside, followed by miserable screams. Among the dozens of people, a few people immediately guarded the cave entrance. The rest all rushed in. With the sound of movement, Guan Yu rode his horse to the top of a spirit stone mine. He stroked his long beard and pulled out a large flag from his storage pouch. Hi! With a sound, he inserted it into the mountain top. The hero flag fluttered in the wind. This was the signal for an all-out attack. How dare you? Who dares to provoke me, Ong Kwang-tsung? A figure flew out from a row of wooden houses in the mine. Then, as if a nest had exploded, all the disciples guarding the mine of Ong Kwang-tsung flew out. Looking around, a group of black-clothed people had already surrounded the mine in the mountain. From the stunned expressions of many people, it could be seen that they clearly had not reacted to what was happening. A small black flag appeared in the hands of the third company's commander beside Guan Yu. He raised his hand and waved it. More than 100 people belonging to the third company immediately shot into the crowd from all directions and attacked fiercely. Immediately, the scene of the Ong Kwang-tsung disciples surrounding the more than 100 people of the third company appeared. For a moment, there was a flash of light, and the sounds of fighting could be heard incessantly. With a cold snort from Guan Yu, a small black flag also appeared in the hands of the second company's commander. He raised it and waved it left and right. The Ong Kwang-tsung disciples who were fighting the third company in the mine were immediately surrounded by more than 100 people from the outside. A massacre had begun. Ong Kwang-tsung was immediately attacked from all sides. He was in a precarious situation and could be annihilated at any time. This was a battle without any suspense. The people from Utopia were originally the elite disciples of the top 3 sects in the Orthodox and Devil sects. They had been through a long period of killing in the Demon Ghost region. In terms of fighting, they were top-notch experts among people of the same cultivation level. Half of them were at the nascent soul stage and half of them were at the core formation stage. After going through military training, they emphasized on mutual cooperation. If one person attacked, there would definitely be 2 to 3 people to help defend. As for Ong Kwang-tsung, most of them were at the foundation establishment stage. There was only one person who was at the late stage of the nascent soul stage. That person had long been entangled and beaten up by a few nascent soul stage cultivators. The company commander raised his hand and clenched his fist. The remaining 2 platoons immediately narrowed the encirclement to prevent anyone from taking the opportunity to escape. On the other side, after Yu Qianzhou successfully destroyed the communication array in the cave with his men, he immediately ordered the platoon to ignore the other fights and split into groups of 2 to 3 to search for the miners in the various caves. The miners were disciples who did not have any artifacts, so they had to be captured alive. Those who could not be captured alive were to be killed on the spot. The platoon immediately accepted the order and dispersed. Yu Qianzhou flew to Guan Yu's side. It just so happened that the late-stage nascent soul cultivator from Ong Kwang-tsung saw that the situation was hopeless and tried to break through the encirclement to escape. Yu Qianzhou coldly glanced at him and shouted in a deep voice, "Kill!" He did not have a good impression of these so-called elders from Ong Kwang-tsung. The 3 late nascent soul stage company commanders beside Guan Yu flashed over at the same time, and with a joint attack in midair, they knocked the man down on the spot. The 3 nascent soul stage cultivators who were originally surrounding him also flew up from below, 3 on top, and 3 below. The 6 of them attacked in midair, and the late nascent soul stage cultivator from the Azure Light sect let out a miserable scream, and turned into a rain of blood. The 3 company commanders flew back to Guan Yu's side as if nothing had happened. The battle ended very quickly. From the start of the attack to the end, it only took a quarter of an hour. Yu Qianzhou looked at his subordinates in the field. After the battle, not a single one of them died. Only a few of them were slightly injured. With such an absolute advantage, coupled with careful preparation and a surprise attack, they should be able to achieve such a result. Yu Qianzhou nodded in satisfaction and shouted, "Don't hesitate, clean up the battlefield. Take everything you can, quickly." The remaining 2 platoons immediately rushed down. At the same time, more than 10 nascent soul stage cultivators flew in all directions to help. The group of people immediately moved. Those Onquancung disciples who were lying on the ground and dying were immediately stabbed a few more times. There was no need to leave those who couldn't be saved alive. This was one of the subjects in the previous drill. Then, a large-scale sweep began. Storage bags and the like were directly pulled out from the corpses. Even a flying sword that had fallen to the ground was not spared. The platoon that had been ordered by Yu Qianzhou to capture the miners escorted a group of people out one after another. These miners were people who were not well liked in Onquancung, and they had suffered a lot here. During the capture process, almost no one resisted. At this moment, when they saw the corpses of the Onquancung disciples on the ground, they did not have a trace of pity on their faces. Instead, when they faced the men in black around them, their expressions were filled with fear, not knowing what would happen to them. The platoon leader came over and reported, "Leader, all the miners that can be captured are here." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand to dismiss him. He leaped into the air and pressed down with his palm. His divine sense enveloped the trembling miners, and the platoon of people instantly entered Utopia. He then walked to the side of the Onquancung disciples who were injured but could still be healed. With a wave of his hand, he sent them back to Utopia. After the entire spirit stone mine was swept, everyone quickly gathered together. Guan Yu took out a small black flag with the word "Hero" embroidered on it in gold. He waved his hand and shot it at a stone pillar. With a ding, the black flag was inserted into it. Guan Yu returned to the team. Yu Qianzhou waved his hands, and everyone disappeared. The spirit stone mine of Onquancung, which had been bathed in blood, was dead silent. Only the shattered corpses on the ground could prove that a fierce battle had taken place here. Chapter 228. In Utopia's military camp, when everyone returned, Bai Suzhen had already led a group of women to stand around them. They were either on the roofs or on the walls, watching over the people who had just been captured. Looking at their dispirited and pained expressions, Yu Qianzhou naturally understood what Bai Suzhen had done to them. "I'll give everyone 5 minutes to rest," Yu Qianzhou shouted from the field. When his gaze met Bai Suzhen's concerned gaze, he shook his head and smiled, indicating that there was no danger. After fighting with all his might, he felt that his primordial energy had been depleted. He immediately lifted his hood and took out an energy recovery pill and stuffed it into his mouth. Everyone smiled and walked to the corner of the square and began to pour out the spoils of war from the storage pouches. It was hard to tell how many things were stored in the storage pouches, but once they were poured out, it was enough to scare people. Hundreds of people shook out the storage pouches, and the things they collected suddenly piled up like a small mountain. There was a large pile of miscellaneous things, especially spirit stones. Bai Suzhen nodded slightly, and the women under her immediately flew over. They took out their storage bags and began to sort out the items. For example, the spirit stones of the lower, middle, and lower grades were all stored separately. When Yu Qianzhou saw that the female disciples were very familiar with many people in the military, a thought occurred to him, and he nodded to himself. Some of them looked like a good match. It was time to allow them to take root here. Only then would they truly treat this place as their home. The soldiers here should be professional. When they were free, they could go home and live their lives. Only when they had a life would there be hope. It was not a long-term solution to rely solely on spiritual rule. As their spiritual leader, he should consider their future. When the 5 minutes were up, Guan Yu gave the order, and the special forces in black gathered again. Yu Qianzhou looked at the people in front of him and said with a smile, "I just thought of something. I feel that many of our members are a good match with the female members of Ethereal Palace. I've decided that after the completion of this mission, men and women can freely interact with each other during their free time. If there's someone who has feelings for each other, they can look for your instructors to register and become Dao companions. What do you guys think? Good, good, good. All the warriors cheered excitedly. Some even shouted, "Long live the leader." Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Damn it! Why do I feel like Hitler? Guan Yu frowned. Why did boss say something like this before the big battle? Wasn't he afraid of affecting morale? Bai Suzhen looked over in surprise. She didn't know why Yu Qianzhou would suddenly have such an idea. The eyes of the female disciples who were tidying up sparkled, and many of them blushed. It was obvious that there was a man they liked in the group. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand. After everyone quietened down, he said with a smile, "Let's make this clear first. It has to be voluntary. No coercion is allowed. Otherwise, I won't let him off. Anyway, Utopia is big enough. When the time comes, I'll mark out a piece of land. Those who become Dao companions will have Ethereal Palace build a house for everyone. Other than the normal training and missions, everyone can live a normal life. Currently, there are more men than women here, but don't worry. In the future, there will be more and more women in Utopia. After this mission is completed, I'll come up with a plan as soon as possible. Long live the leader! Long live the leader!" A group of old men shouted excitedly. "Prepare to set off." Yu Qianzhou shouted in a deep voice. He, who had been smiling just now, suddenly turned hostile. Everyone was stunned and immediately quietened down. The former opened his palm and enveloped everyone with his divine sense. The group of people in the field disappeared. The battle started again. Due to the careful deployment, there were still no accidents this time, and they successfully took down another spirit stone mine. From the situation of this attack, it was obvious that Huangsang did not know about the previous attack. This mine was still sparsely guarded. At the same time, it also meant that the battle plan they had come up with was feasible. In less than 8 hours, all of Huangsang's spirit stone mines had been looted. Yu Qianzhou wanted to see how Huangsang and the other old fellows would react when they found out that all of their spirit stone mines had been looted. This time, they were much more ruthless than the Illusion Palace. Not only had the 6 spirit stone mines been looted, even the dam miners had been taken away. Even if Huangsang wanted to start working again, where could he find nearly 1,000 miners? This type of work was not something ordinary people could do. At the thought of this, Yu Qianzhou felt that his anger had been vented. How dare they offer a bounty to capture me? This is the consequence, damn it. Even if you can solve the problem of the miners, you will definitely have to send a large number of people to guard the mines, and the strength you will send will probably not be weaker than this time, right? If the strength is weaker than this time, I don't mind looting again. If I can split a large number of forces from Huangsang's old nest, I don't mind going up to Huangsang and taking a bite or 2 of them. Damn it! In fact, the operation this time was not very smooth sailing. During the last battle, something regrettable happened. 2 core formation stage members died in battle, and their corpses were brought back to Utopia. It was indeed painful for Yu Qianzhou. These people were all elites with rich combat experience. In addition, they had been nurtured for so many years. Although 2 people had died, it did not stop Yu Qianzhou's determination to loot the Deluo sect again. With a command, the troops set off again. At a place not far from the Deluo sect spirit stone mine, Yu Qianzhou put on a golden mask that he had asked Chen Feng to make before he left. According to the agreement with the Allure Beauty, he found the early-stage tribulation passing elder that she had sent. The elder was quite curious about Yu Qianzhou. He did not know what kind of person was behind the golden mask, and he could not see through his cultivation. He had no choice but to put on the mask. First, it was to distinguish his identity from the other team members. Second, he did not want the people sent by the allure beauty to recognize him. If he was recognized, who knew what kind of trouble he would cause for appearing in so many places in a day? When the elder saw the black-clothed special forces that Yu Qianzhou had brought with him, he was shocked. This was the first time he had seen such a group of cultivators in the cultivation world, especially after the attack had begun. With a gesture, hundreds of people separated and regrouped. They did not even need to say a word. The tacit understanding between the attack and defense was simply amazing. In the cultivation world, a person could leave his back to others without any worries. Just how much trust was this? Before the elder made his move, he also put on the black outfit that Yu Qianzhou had given him. Naturally, he was afraid that the people from the Deluo sect would recognize him as an elder of the Phantom Palace. After he fought with the Deluo sect elder, Yu Qianzhou's troops went all out. Since 2 of their comrades had died last time, this time, they were as ruthless as they could be. They would not let go of their opponents until they were completely out of breath. Once the aura of breaking 1,000 armies was unleashed, it would be incredible. The Deluo sect, which was originally thought to be much more difficult to defeat than Onquangceng, was unexpectedly faster than Onquangceng. However, Yu Qianzhou's idea of leaving as many people alive as possible to bring back to Utopia was shattered. All the Deluo sect disciples who were guarding the mine were killed. The battle on Yu Qianzhou's side had already ended. The 2 tribulation stage cultivators fought from the sky to the ground, and from the ground back to the sky. Seeing that the elder sent by the allure beauty was unable to defeat the Deluo sect elder and even seemed to be at a disadvantage, a few nascent soul cultivators rushed forward to help. However, something unfortunate happened. The difference in strength between the tribulation stage and the nascent soul stage was like the difference between heaven and earth. The Deluo sect elder swung his sword in the air, and a sharp sword light slashed out. 2 of the 4 nascent soul cultivators who rushed forward immediately turned into a rain of blood. Yu Qianzhou's eyes were bloodshot. He roared crazily and called the remaining 2 people back. Then, Bai Suzhen, dressed in white, appeared in the air. Chapter 229. The 2 early-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators in the air were shocked. They stopped fighting and dodged to the side, sizing up Bai Suzhen who had suddenly appeared. The Deluo sect elder suddenly turned around and fled. This woman's cultivation was unfathomable, and it was obvious that she was not one of them. It was more important for him to stay alive. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand and pointed, shouting, "Don't let him escape. I want his life." The men in black felt warmth in their hearts. They could feel the anger in their leader's heart after 2 of their team members had died. Their leader cared about them a lot. Bai Suzhen could naturally feel his current mood. Her pretty face turned cold, and her beautiful eyes looked at the person who had escaped. After disappearing into thin air, she reappeared in front of the Deluo sect elder. When the crowd looked from afar, they saw Bai Suzhen grabbing 5 black fiends with her palms and trapping the elder. The elder did not even have the strength to fight back, and he was turned into a rain of blood by the 5 black fiends the moment they clashed. He screamed in pain in the air, teleportation. Early-stage tribulation transcendence. The elder sent by the allure seductress sucked in a breath of cold air, secretly shocked. The people from Utopia knew that Misty Palace's sister Bai was powerful, but they did not expect her to be so powerful that an early-stage tribulation transcendence cultivator could not withstand a single attack from her. They all looked at each other. Little did they know that after Bai Suzhen sensed Yu Qianzhou's anger, her killing intent rose, and she used the mountain-piercing claw. With her late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivation and a high-grade magic treasure, dealing with a mere early-stage tribulation transcendence cultivator was naturally a piece of cake. "You can go back now." Yu Qianzhou pointed at the elder sent by the allure seductress and said rudely. He had lost 2 nascent soul experts, so he could not be polite even if he wanted to. That person cupped his hands in the air, not daring to say anything. If he angered Bai Suzhen, his life would be in danger as well. He quickly flew away. Before leaving, he glanced at the golden word, hero, on the black flag. When Bai Suzhen stood by Yu Qianzhou's side, Yu Qianzhou's face was still gloomy, as if he was still angry. At the side, Guan Yu cupped his fists and called out, "Sister Bai." Bai Suzhen nodded at him and quietly guarded beside Yu Qianzhou. Guan Yu didn't say anything else and ordered his subordinates to quickly clean up the battlefield. After everyone returned to Utopia with their spoils of war, they rested for a while before setting off again. With the previous example, Yu Qianzhou no longer had any hope for the people sent by the Allure Beauty. Bai Suzhen changed into a black outfit that accentuated her curves, and a black veil covered her face as she followed Yu Qianzhou to fight. Everyone had already seen Bai Suzhen's means. Now that they saw Sister Bai change into her attire and fight personally, they were immediately filled with confidence. In the subsequent battles, Bai Suzhen would personally take action against the Tribulation Transcendence elders of the Deluo sect Spirit Stone Mines. She would usually finish off her opponents in 1 or 2 exchanges. As for the elders sent by the Allure Beauty, they were sent by Yu Qianzhou to put out the fire. If there was a slightly tough spot that threatened the safety of his team members or made it difficult for them, the elder would immediately rush over. After using it, he would immediately chase them away. The elders usually didn't dare to have any objections. The key was that one of the black-robed masked women was too powerful. She was actually at the late stage of the Tribulation Transcendence stage. In less than a day, the Deluo sect's 15 spirit stone mines and Onquangsung's 6 spirit stone mines had all been looted. There were more than a dozen piles of spoils of war in Utopia, and it would probably take more than a day to sort them out. In this battle, they had lost 5 nascent soul cultivators and 13 core formation cultivators, a total of 18 members. Yu Qianzhou's heart ached terribly. Fortunately, more than 4,000 people had come in at once. Most of them were miners from the 21 spirit stone mines, which was more than 10 times the original number. Seeing so many people, Yu Qianzhou's mood finally improved. In the following period of time, Yu Qianzhou didn't leave Utopia at all. He didn't even have time to flirt with Chu Ping-er. He was extremely busy with Guan Yu. With more people, there were naturally more things to sort out. As the chief instructor, Guan Yu was busy and happy. Originally, he had more than 300 people under him, but now, he had nearly 5,000 people under him. The feeling was naturally different. On the same day, Yu Qianzhou summoned Guan Yu, Chen Feng, and the 3 company commanders to a meeting to discuss the issue of the nearly 5,000 people. After some discussion, Yu Qianzhou made a decision. Everyone was divided into 48 companies, with 3 companies forming a battalion. There would be a total of 16 battalions. One of the battalions would be given to Chen Feng to help him with logistics. After all, with more people, Chen Feng would also have to increase his manpower. Otherwise, the logistics would not be able to keep up. Chen Feng naturally had no objections to this, but he asked Yu Qianzhou to give him a backbone who was good at management. Most of his attention was on crafting talismans, refining weapons, and refining pills. How could he have the time to manage so many people? Yu Qianzhou handed this matter over to Guan Yu. Guan Yu generously called a platoon commander over and announced his promotion to battalion commander on the spot to help Chen Feng manage the group of people under him. When the platoon commander heard that he was going to leave the combat unit to handle logistics, he was clearly unwilling. Even a fool would know that with so many people, he would definitely be promoted. The atmosphere in the Hero Special Forces was one where fighting was an honor. Who would be willing to go to the logistics department? However, he had no choice. After all, the few powerhouses of Utopia thought highly of him. After thinking about it, he felt that it was an honorable thing to do, so he reluctantly agreed. However, he also made a request. He requested that he bring 3 people from the old team members to help him manage. Otherwise, it would be a little troublesome to rely on one person. Naturally, the powerhouses had no objections to this. Of course, this was only a small part of the story. The remaining 15 battalions were divided into 5 regiments, with each regiment having 3 battalions. 3 company commanders were promoted to regiment commanders. Then, 2 platoon commanders, who had performed outstandingly in this battle, were specially promoted. Now, there were 5 regiment commanders. The 2 people who had been promoted from platoon commanders to regiment commanders were immediately called to participate in the meeting. Head of State Yu Qianqiu announced the appointment of the 5 people on the spot. The 2 people who had suddenly been promoted from platoon commanders to regiment commanders were a little overjoyed. According to the current system, they had been promoted by several levels. The 2 of them thanked the head of state excitedly. This was much more exciting than being in those *T sects in the cultivation world. This meant that the 2 of them could also participate in such high-level meetings in the future. The 3 regiment commanders who were originally company commanders congratulated the 2 of them. The 2 of them thanked them reservedly. Back then, the 3 of them were their leaders. Never in their dreams would they have imagined that they would be on the same level as them now. After confirming the candidates for regiment commanders, Yu Qianqiu continued to host the meeting. He ordered Guan Yu and the 5 regiment commanders to start selecting the battalion commanders from the original, hero, special forces. The criteria for selection were, first, the person had outstanding performance in the Spirit Stone mine robbery. Second, the person's cultivation level. Finally, the person's commanding ability under the same conditions. After an intense discussion, Guan Yu and the 5 regiment commanders finally confirmed the candidates for 3 battalion commanders. A total of 15 battalion commanders were promoted. After deciding on the candidates for battalion commanders, the meeting continued to expand. They screened the candidates for company commanders again. After some discussion, the 45th company commander was revealed. After the meeting ended, Guan Yu gathered all the team members in the field. The thousands of people who were captured listened at the back. The women under Bai Suzhen were guarding the perimeter. They looked inside curiously, wondering what was going on. Yu Qianqiu stood on one side of the stage and looked at the group of people below. His emotions surged. The more people there were, the better. Didn't a great man in his previous life say, "There is strength in numbers"? The more people there were, the better it would be in the cultivation world. Chief Instructor Guan Yu stood in the middle of the stage and began to announce the orders. Behind him stood the 5 regiment commanders in a row. When the names of the 15 battalion commanders were called out, there was a warm applause below the stage. It was the same when the 45th company commander was appointed. After the orders were announced, Guan Yu announced the process of the appointment. Those who were not selected but had similar cultivation levels were instantly annoyed. If they had known this would happen, they would have risked their lives during the robbery. Sigh. How enviable. It was a great honor to be personally appointed by the head of state. The women under Bai Suzhen looked at the members who were promoted, and their faces were filled with admiration. The team members also accepted the congratulations from their teammates excitedly. The enthusiastic atmosphere made the captives envious. For a moment, the entire field was filled with applause and congratulations. In the end, Guan Yu ordered the 5 regiment commanders again. He gave them half a day to confirm and report the platoon commanders and squad leaders of their subordinates as soon as possible. He also assigned the thousands of captives to their respective subordinates. The 5 regiment commanders accepted the order and the intense work of assigning people began. As for the person belonging to Chen Feng, who was promoted from platoon commander to battalion commander, he picked 3 old team members who had not been promoted to be company commanders. The 3 old team members immediately rolled their eyes and sent him off. They were not too willing to go to the logistics department. If they went to the logistics department, there would be no more battles to fight and the next chance to gain merit would be gone. That person did not care so much. He laughed and said, "From today onwards, we are brothers in hardship. don't be long-winded and follow me." Therefore, he took over 300 captives and left with Xiaofan dejectedly. After the personnel were allocated, Yu Qianzhou first ordered the construction of a Utopia Hero Monument. On this day every year, it would be used to remember the members who had died in battle for Utopia. In the future, as long as there were members who had died in the line of duty, they would be buried in the cemetery behind the monument for everyone to pay their respects. In the following days, Yu Qianzhou was still very busy. He had to implement the marriage policy that he had promised everyone as soon as possible. He also had to expand and renovate the barracks, as well as the treatment of officers at all levels, as well as the training plan for the future. Utopia began an unprecedented construction project. Other than building barracks, they also had to build villas of different levels for officers at the battalion level and above. Yu Qianzhou's idea was that since there were so many levels, he should let his subordinates who had reached a certain level enjoy a certain level of treatment. Chapter 230. He was so busy in Utopia that he did not know that the cultivation world outside was in an uproar. The 21 spiritual stone mines of the Daluo sect and Onquangsang had been attacked on the same day. None of the guards or miners were left alive. Both sects only found out about this a few days later. The entire Daluo sect was shocked, as was the entire upper echelon. After all, it was the second largest sect on the righteous path. When had it ever suffered such a loss? Therefore, the entire Daluo sect took action. First, they sent a large number of guards to protect the spiritual stone mines. Then, they searched for the culprit and informed the Cultivation Alliance, requesting the various sects in the Cultivation Alliance to help find the culprit. Onquangsang was furious. Their spiritual stone mines had already been robbed by the Phantom Palace once, and this time, the culprit was even worse. They had looted all their mines, not leaving a single person alive. During this time, the Blue Light sect had been in trouble again and again. No one knew what bad luck they had. First, more than 10 disciples were killed. Then, a dignified sect leader was killed. Then, all the spirit stone mines were looted. The most embarrassing thing was that Onquangsang had already suffered great losses in the battle with the Blood Demon Palace. They did not have enough manpower to begin with. Now that they had lost so many people, if they were to send another group to guard the 6 spiritual stone mines, Onquangsang would be in danger if someone took the opportunity to cause trouble. But they could not just throw away the 6 spiritual stone mines for nothing, could they? This was the foundation that supported Onquangsang's foothold. Without the spiritual stone mines, their title as the 6th largest sect on the righteous path would probably be lost. In desperation, Onquangsang informed the Cultivation Alliance about this and requested the various sects on the righteous path to help. Yu Qianzhou's attack had indeed hurt Onquangsang's lifeline. However, he was not in the mood to care about this. He was busy building a house in Utopia. When the news reached the Cultivation Alliance, all the sects were shocked. Only then did they realize that the 2 sects were attacked on the same day. Especially from the small black flags left in the 21 spirit stone mines, it was clearly done by the same group of people. But who could have such strength? There were 6,000 to 7,000 people in these mines. Not a single person was left alive in a single day. It was simply unimaginable. Such a large-scale looting operation would require at least a few thousand people to act at the same time, right? With so many people being mobilized in the cultivation world, how could the sects not know about it? This was especially true for the Daluo sect's 15 spirit stone mines, each of which was guarded by a tribulation transcendent stage expert. Didn't the murderer also have the ability to send at least 15 experts at the crossing calamity stage? The only thing they could be sure of was that this incident had been meticulously planned. Otherwise, the 2 factions wouldn't have only received the news a few days later. The 2 golden words on the black flag, hero, what did it mean? Could it be that some sects were deliberately trying to deceive people? The sects of the Cultivation Alliance were shocked, and everyone began to feel insecure. They all secretly speculated that if such a force came for their sects, would they be able to resist it? No matter how hard they thought, they couldn't imagine that Yu Qianzhou had led a few hundred people to raid 21 spirit stone mines in a single day just by relying on the miraculous effect of the golden bead. After all the suspicions, the sects of the Cultivation Alliance who were discussing in the 100 Flowers Valley all targeted the diabolism. From the fact that all the people who were attacked this time were from the righteous path, it could be seen that the murderer was obviously not interested in the righteous path. There were also people who suddenly had a strange suspicion: could this have been done by Yu Qianzhou? During this period of time, the Deluo sect and Onquangsong were wantonly trying to arrest him. Could it be that Yu Qianzhou was deliberately taking revenge? Didn't they say that he had appeared in Swallow City with hundreds of men in black? As soon as this conclusion came out, everyone thought that it was possible, but in the end, it was still uncertain. Unless Yu Qianzhou had another 20 teams of hundreds of men in black, it would be more likely. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to make such a big move. Even if it was Yu Qianzhou who did it, someone must have lent them to him. Who in the cultivation world would lend so many people to a core formation stage cultivator? Then there was only one possibility: the diabolism. Back in the 100 Flowers Valley, didn't they see that Yu Qianzhou was very familiar with the people from the diabolism? Of course, this was just the speculation of the various sections. But no matter what, everyone still locked the culprit on the diabolism. Only the diabolism would do such a thing to the righteous path. There were many people in the Cultivation Alliance, so it didn't take long for this matter to spread throughout the cultivation world. Almost everyone was talking about the mysterious organization called Hero. For a time, the name Hero was known to almost everyone in the cultivation world. Because of the conclusion of the righteous path, the Diabolism Alliance in the 100 Flowers Valley also gathered together. Qiu Wuyuan of the 10,000 demons looked around at the elder in charge of the various diabolism sects and said in a deep voice, "I wonder which sect here did such a big deal. This old man really admires you. Even I, the 10,000 demons, have never done something like this. Since you did it, you might as well stand up and say something. Everyone here is from the diabolism. Such a big matter should give everyone a good idea so that they can prepare, right?" As he said this, Qiu Wuyuan's gaze swept past the elder in charge of the Blood Demon Palace, Wen Zhongping, from time to time. Most of the elder in charge of the diabolism did the same. After all, the Blood Demon Palace had fought with Onquangsong before. And this time, Onquangsong was the unlucky one. It was impossible for the Blood Demon Palace not to be suspicious. Everyone was almost certain that the one who did this to the righteous path was definitely someone from the diabolism. When Zhongping saw that everyone was looking at him strangely, Qiu Wuyuan's expression was even more obvious. It was as if he was saying, "It's already like this. What's the point of pretending? Your Blood Demon Palace should just admit it." Bang! When Zhongping slammed the table and stood up angrily. "Qiu Wuyuan, why are you looking at me like that? Are you suspecting that this was done by the Blood Demon Palace?" Hee hee. Qiu Wuyuan smiled noncommittally. "Wen Zhongping, why are you so agitated? I just saw that you seemed to be in good spirits today, so I took a few more glances. Didn't you notice that everyone was looking at you?" His words were clearly saying that everyone suspected that this was done by the Blood Demon Palace. Good spirits my ass. Wen Zhongping's furious gaze swept over them, but they all looked away as if nothing had happened. This immediately infuriated him. If this matter had been done by the Blood Demon Palace, then he would have admitted to it. However, it was not done by the Blood Demon Palace. How could he admit to it? This was practically an unprecedented injustice. However, to be able to live to this age and sit in this position, how could he be so easily wronged by a few words from others? When Zhongping restrained his anger, and suddenly stared at Qiu Wuyuan as he cackled, "If my Blood Demon Palace were to make such a big move, I'm sure it wouldn't be hidden from everyone here." To be able to do such a thing without anyone knowing, in the demonic path, it's simply, hee. 10,000 demons is indeed a good move. Xiao Wuyuan was stunned. He saw that everyone was suddenly looking at him with a thoughtful expression. He immediately said angrily, "Bullsh*t. If this was done by the 10,000 demons, then I, Xiao Wuyuan, will die a horrible death. Wen Zhongping, if you have the guts, make an oath too. Let's do it." Wen Zhongping looked around at his people and swore, "If this was done by the Blood Demon Palace, then I, Wen Zhongping, will die a horrible death as well." Now that the two of them had even sworn oaths, there was no reason for the others to suspect anything. However, this was something that even the Blood Demon Palace couldn't avoid being discovered. If other smaller sects had done it, they naturally wouldn't be able to hide it. Therefore, everyone racked their brains, but still couldn't figure out who did it. Logically speaking, who else but the diabolism would do such a good thing? Everyone. Xiao Wuyuan suddenly stood up and looked around. He frowned. Let's not talk about who did this for now. Without a doubt, the righteous path has their eyes on the diabolism. Everyone, send the news back to your sects as soon as possible, so that they can prepare in advance. Therefore, not long after, the entire diabolism seemed to be facing a great enemy. The righteous path also became nervous when they heard the news. The righteous path and the diabolism seemed to be on the verge of breaking out. Daluo sect and Nongguangcang also lost interest in competing with Yu Qianzhou. Maintaining the survival of their sects was their top priority. Chapter 231. The only person in the outside world who knew that the Spirit Stone mine had been attacked was the Allure Temptress. However, she had also gotten the wrong idea. She thought that Yu Qianzhou had sent out 21 teams at the same time. When she received reports from the 15 elders that experts at the late-stage tribulation stage had appeared in all 15 places, the Allure Temptress was shocked. Didn't that mean that there were 15 experts at the late-stage tribulation stage? She could not help but guess who the heroes behind Yu Qianzhou were. Why had she never heard of them before? In the Wu family's ancestral hall, the heads of the 4 families gathered together. The 4 of them could not help but be concerned about the major events in the cultivation world. After some guesses, Wu Sihai suddenly laughed and said, "If I'm not wrong, the one who did this might be Yu Qianzhou, whom we're looking for. The power behind this kid is really unfathomable." The other 3 family heads asked him why he was so sure. Wu Sihai smiled and said, "The Daluo sect and Nongguangcang can't find out who did it. The entire cultivation world can't find out either. Furthermore, the 2 sects happen to provoke that kid. I'm afraid that kid has something to do with this. I'm afraid only that kid has the ability to do something like this." Regardless of whether the outside world's guesses were right or wrong, to Yu Qianzhou, what was done was already in the past. He was not in the mood to care about it now. Half a month later, a large number of buildings had been built in Utopia. It was naturally because of the 4,000 to 5,000 extraordinary cultivators. Otherwise, it would not have been so fast. After some initial constructive guidance, Yu Qianzhou did not bother with the details anymore. He left the details to his subordinates. At night, Yu Qianzhou thought of something and felt a little depressed. He stood alone in front of Misty Peak and looked at the thousands of people who were busy with their work. He could not help but sigh deeply. Every time he was in danger or in trouble, he would always need Bai Suzhen's help. As a man, it was too much of a blow to his pride to always need a woman to protect him. Originally, he thought that with a large number of spirit stones, he would be able to rapidly increase his cultivation level. However, after he entered the core formation stage, the speed at which he could refine the true essence in his body was too slow. Others were troubled by the lack of sufficient spiritual energy, but he had enough spiritual energy, yet he felt that the speed at which he condensed his core was too slow. Was it because he didn't know how lucky he was? Standing at the edge of the cliff, Yu Qianzhou shook his head and smiled bitterly. He sat down cross-legged with his eyes closed and examined the tiny core in his dantian. His Zhenyuan was attached to the core, and strands of it kept pouring into it. It was condensing at a speed that was difficult to see clearly. At this speed, how long would it take for the core to become the size of a middle-stage core formation cultivator? Even if he cultivated day and night, it would still take him close to 10 years. In the eyes of others, this speed was already unreasonably fast. However, if she only reached the middle stage of the core formation realm after 10 years, wouldn't she have to ask her sister to protect her when she was in trouble? And this protection would take another 10 years. Besides, even if he did reach the middle stage of the core formation stage, what would he do to those old guys at the crossing calamity stage? Then how many years would it take to reach the late stage of the core formation realm? After the core broke the nascent soul, it would take an unknown number of years to reach the nascent soul realm. After that, she would have to slowly climb from the middle stage to the crossing tribulation realm. By the time she reached the late stage of the crossing tribulation realm, she would be over 100 years old. And this was under the condition that she thought everything would be smooth sailing. In reality, the hurdle between each stage had blocked many cultivators. It would be good if she could smoothly break through to the late stage of the crossing tribulation realm before she was 200 years old. Yu Qianzhou opened his eyes and stood up. Speechless, he looked up at the starry sky and sighed again. In fact, there were some things that he could also think of. For cultivators who could cultivate to the crossing tribulation realm, the sects would always provide them with spirit stones. He didn't believe that, for cultivators who had reached the privileged class, the sects would really provide them with spirit stones as they said on the surface. The reason was very obvious. At the point where they could set the rules of the game, who would make things difficult for him? From this, it could be imagined that the advantage of having an abundance of spirit stones was only in the early stage. In the early stage, his cultivation speed was much faster than the middle and lower level cultivators of the various sections. But once he reached the crossing tribulation realm, his cultivation speed would definitely be similar to the upper level cultivators of the various sections. This was because no matter how many spirit stones you had, the speed at which you could refine true essence was obvious. Unless someone could break through the stage of refining true essence. Why was Bai Changchun invincible before he was 300 years old? Why was he able to create his own cultivation method? Yu Qianzhou looked at the sky full of stars and suddenly remembered the painting that he saw in the Wu clan's ancestral hall. In the painting, Bai Changchun was standing on a cliff with his hands behind his back, looking up at the stars. Wasn't it the same as what he was doing now? Could it be that the sky full of stars was hiding some secret? The feeling of heaven? Yu Qianzhou muttered this sentence. From the inscription on the painting, it seemed that the phrase that Bai Changchun often said was, the feeling of heaven. Wu Sihai also said that Bai Changchun's cultivation was a different path, and that he had comprehended the heavenly Tao. What was the heavenly Tao? It was too illusory. Although he didn't know if it was true that the old demon was invincible within 3 moves, just based on the fact that he had reached the soul formation stage and lived for more than 2,000 years, these 2 points were enough to be admired. The stars were related to the heavenly Tao? Yu Qianzhou stood on the cliff and raised his head to look at the sky. The night sky was sparkling, and the sky was filled with little stars. He didn't know how many times his eyes had been dazzled by the stars. Yu Qianzhou steeled his heart and thought to himself, I'm going to find out what relationship this star has with the illusory heavenly Tao. One day, I'm going to be invincible under the heavens. The night dew was deep, and Yu Qianzhou's clothes were already drenched in a thin layer of cold dew. However, he didn't know that on the roof of the ethereal palace, Bai Suzhen was staring at him with a puzzled expression. Seeing that he seemed to be competing with the night sky, she would also look up at the sky from time to time, but she didn't find anything special. The sky was turning white, and the stars in the sky gradually faded. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand and massaged the back of his neck, which was a little sore. After working hard for a whole night, he still couldn't figure out anything. He didn't even know if this bullshit heavenly Tao was real or not. He could only dejectedly stop his cultivation and return to the ethereal palace to catch up on his sleep. However, people were like this. Once they were interested in something, it was enough to attract people for a period of time. At least, it would be like this until they were completely tired of it. Therefore, Yu Qianzhou spent a few consecutive nights watching the stars on the cliff, trying to figure out something. In the end, he spent more than 10 nights watching the stars. However, it seemed that he wasn't fated with the heavenly Tao. Apart from the slight movement of the stars in the night sky every day, there was nothing else. Using the knowledge from his previous life to understand, it seemed that it was due to the rotation and revolution of the stars. After a few more nights, Yu Qianzhou really couldn't stand it anymore. Not only did he look at the stars at night, no matter what he did during the day, his mind would be filled with stars swaying in front of his eyes. He could almost memorize the stars in the sky. He was a little strange, which made those who were concerned about him a little anxious, but he said that he was fine. At night, Yu Qianzhou habitually walked up the cliff. Just as he reached the edge of the cliff, Yu Qianzhou gave himself a fierce slap, waking himself up. Damn it! If this continued, he would become crazy. Perhaps that whatever Tan Fei drew was just a Bai Changchun-style stargazing map, but he took it seriously and foolishly stayed here to watch the stars every day. If it was really useful, why would the 4 great clans still need to do business? They would have long been watching the stars every day. Stupid as can be. Yu Qianzhou scolded himself, feeling as if he had suddenly come to a realization. He thought to himself, if I have this time, I might as well refine a few good flying swords. I still haven't used the mysterious golden sand I bought last time. Immediately, a flying sword shot out, carrying him down the deep valley. He let the cold wind blow on his face, wanting to wake himself up a little more. When he reached the bottom, the first thing he ran over was to see what Chen Feng was doing. In the end, Chen Feng was deeply immersed in his own Tao, guarding an alchemy furnace, stubbornly refusing to come to his senses. Yu Qianzhou didn't disturb him. He inspected the bright red and scorching hot underground. Seeing that the logistics department was operating in an orderly manner, he clearly didn't need to worry about anything. Thus, he found a cave with intense earth fire and burrowed into it, preparing to personally refine the weapon. Out of thin air, he summoned the 100 flying swords he used, then took out the mystic gold sand, and placed it to the side. The violent earth fire in front of him made his face a little hot. However, with his current cultivation, he could still withstand this little bit of heat, as long as he didn't jump into the fire to be roasted. When refining a weapon, the first thing to do was to be free of distracting thoughts. Otherwise, it would be easy to refine a waste. It was fine to waste a little normally, but it would be a pity to waste the mystic gold sand that he had spent 500,000 high-grade spirit stones to buy. Exhaling and concentrating, his state of mind should have gradually stabilized, but unknowingly, the sky full of stars that had been deeply engraved in his mind for the past few days came out again. He didn't know what was going on. Being in the cave, with his cultivation, he should have only felt a little hot on the surface of his body, but because of the sky full of stars that suddenly appeared in his mind, it seemed to subconsciously guide the true essence in his body to do some strange circulation. The heat that should have been blocked outside of his body was actually drawn in through the pores on the surface of his body, and integrated into the true essence in his body to circulate. His body immediately became warm, and the heat outside of his body didn't seem to have that scorching feeling anymore. While in a daze, Yu Qianzhou suddenly came to his senses. It didn't matter that he woke up, the strange phenomenon of the true essence circulating in his body immediately stopped, as if it had never happened. However, the heat contained in the true essence in his body was an indiscernible fact. Yu Qianzhou's body suddenly trembled. Could this have something to do with the sky full of stars that appeared in his mind? Chapter 232. Could this be the so-called heavenly Tao? Yu Qianzhou was a little excited. He had never seen such a phenomenon before when he was refining here. It must be the after-effect of looking at the stars during this period of time. After pondering a little, he was not very sure. He immediately suppressed his excitement and focused on the heat energy contained in the true essence that had just been absorbed into his body. Although the subtle heat energy was extremely small, he could still discover its existence if he paid attention. It was mixed with the white true essence in his body and appeared to be abnormally active. The bright red little guy was dancing like a fairy and was very cute. But because of the existence of this little guy, he was actually not afraid of the heat outside. Yu Qianzhou began to guide the true essence in his meridians according to his usual cultivation method. When the true essence in his body had completed a cycle, his dantian was like a filter. All the true essence that had entered and exited the meridians were like fish returning to the sea. Once the little guy that was mixed with the true essence entered his dantian, it was like a fish returning to the sea. It happily swam towards the core and absorbed the white core. Soon, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had drilled into the core. What was going on? Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He checked the true essence in his body and found that all the little guys had run into the white core. Damn it! There shouldn't be any problems, right? If this father's core was damaged, all my cultivation would be wasted. After careful observation, the white core was still quietly suspended in the center of his dantian. There was no abnormal reaction, and the yuan qi was also operating normally. It was fine just like that. While Yu Qianzhou was puzzled, he suddenly began to feel the scorching heat on the surface of his body again. Looking at the surging earth fire in front of him, Yu Qianzhou really wanted to do what he did just now and absorb the little guy inside. But what happened just now was purely an unconscious action. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out the path of the true essence's circulation. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the flying sword and the mystic gold sand on the ground. How could he still calm down to practice this thing? He had finally figured out a clue, so he couldn't give it up so easily. It was more important to become as awesome as Bai Changchun. That way, he wouldn't have to rely on a woman to protect him in the future. With a wave of his hand, he collected all the items. He dusted off his long robe and sat down. However, the rock below was really a little hot, so he didn't care too much. As long as he didn't die from the heat, it was fine. Yu Qianzhou looked at the raging fire in front of him and took a deep breath of the scorching air. He slowly closed his eyes and cleared his mind of distracting thoughts. He didn't want to think about anything else other than the star chart that he had memorized recently. Gradually, he forgot about the scorching heat under his butt and the scorching heat in the cave. It was as if he was immersed in the scene of looking at the stars at the top of the misty peak. He couldn't feel any heat, only the cool night breeze at the top of the mountain and the twinkling stars in the sky. It was so beautiful and enchanting. In the deep starry sky, the stars were still the same stars. He could see them every night. Some seemed to be fixed in the same position forever, while some seemed to be changing position every night. It might not be possible to find anything by looking at it separately, but if he looked at the position of the stars for a few nights, he would find that these stars seemed to have a certain orbit. If he thought about it abstractly, could those fixed stars be regarded as the human body's bones, flesh, and meridians? And could those stars with orbits be regarded as the body's genuine qi? The star chart in his mind was very complicated. Once he got into the state, Yu Qianzhou found something very interesting. The stars in the north, south, east, west, and center seemed to have their own orbit cycle. He couldn't remember the other directions very clearly. After all, it was not easy to remember the complexity of the starry sky. However, because he stood on the cliff every night to observe the stars in the south, he could remember the changes of the stars in the south more clearly. The stars in the south seemed to have a big cycle of changes. However, the observation time was short, so it was impossible to grasp the changes. But if he looked at some of the stars in the south, he could clearly see a orbit cycle every 7 days. Noticing these changes, Yu Qianzhou carefully recalled the orbit of the stars, trying to remember it. Suddenly, the genuine qi in his body began to circulate on its own, implying the changing orbit of the star chart in his mind. Yu Qianzhou felt the changes in the genuine qi in his body and woke up. He was slightly startled, but was immediately overjoyed. So it was like this. Not daring to have too many distracting thoughts, he immediately closed his eyes to eliminate them. Following the changing orbit of the star chart, he consciously guided the genuine qi in his body to circulate. The high temperature in the surroundings gradually decreased. Not wanting to open his eyes and be distracted, he released his divine sense to check the changes in his surroundings. Sure enough, in the raging and tyrannical earth fire, many tiny yellow dots that were invisible to the naked eye began to surge out and pounce towards him. Perhaps these little guys could only be seen by releasing their divine sense to carefully look. One by one, the little guys burrowed into the meridians in his body through his pores, and began to circulate together with the genuine qi. Every time it circulated a cycle, the genuine qi would circulate from his dantian, and those little guys would happily pounce towards the white core. Yu Qianzhou couldn't figure out what was going on, but he really wanted to find out whether it was a good or bad thing for these little guys, who should be called fire elements, to merge with his core. As he gradually became familiar with the changing orbit of the star chart, Yu Qianzhou was already able to directly control the circulation of genuine qi. As a result, he discovered that as the circulation speed increased, the speed at which the fire elements in the earth fire surged towards him also increased. In the end, they were all absorbed by his core. At first, he was a little afraid. He really didn't know what would happen if so many fire elements rushed into his core. However, the subsequent reaction made him happy. As more and more fire elements rushed into his core, the white core actually became slightly hot. The genuine qi in his dantian was being roasted, and the speed at which it adhered to and condensed into the core seemed to increase. Although it was almost invisible, Yu Qianzhou still discovered that the speed at which the core was condensing was increasing. Damn! There was actually such an effect. Yu Qianzhou became excited again. Previously, because the speed at which he refined genuine qi and condensed his core was too slow, he estimated that it would take at least 10 years for him to break through to the middle stage of core formation. Now, it seemed that there was a great possibility that he could break through earlier. This was truly the will of the heavens. After his ecstasy, he thought of a problem. The 4 directions of the stars in the sky each had their own orbit, but why would the southern orbit absorb the fire elements when converted into genuine qi? Why didn't it absorb other things? Could it be that the 5 directions of the star chart each had its own effect? Could it be, he suddenly remembered a saying about the 5 elements in his previous life. It was that the 5 elements were divided into metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The 5 elements corresponded to 5 directions: metal to the west, wood to the east, water to the north, fire to the south, and earth to the center. Wasn't the star chart of the south the star chart he was using? Could it be that the 5 directions of the star chart could separately absorb the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth? Since there was such a saying, then what he was experiencing now was not a coincidence. There must be a reason behind it. He needed to find an opportunity to understand the other 4 directions of the star chart and see if there were any other effects. As for now, naturally, it was more important to increase his cultivation level. The corner of Yu Qianzhou's mouth twitched, revealing a trace of a smile. He began to increase the speed at which his genuine qi revolved and crazily absorbed the fire elements from the earth fire. In the alchemy room not far from Yu Qianzhou, Chen Feng looked at the pill in his hand that had a faint halo and laughed out loud. He could finally be like boss and concoct such a high-quality pill. Hearing the commotion inside, one of Chen Feng's subordinates walked in. Seeing the pill in Chen Feng's hand, he immediately cupped his hands and bowed. "Congratulations, Chief Chen. You have finally concocted a high-quality pill. Chief Chen's title was given to him by Yu Qianzhou. It meant that he was the person in charge of logistics, so he was called Chief Chen. Chen Feng's subordinates also called him this. Yes. It wasn't easy. Chen Feng sighed and turned to ask, how many days did I stay in the alchemy room this time? 13 days, the person replied. 13 days? Now that you mention it, I am a little hungry. Chen Feng rubbed his shriveled stomach. He had not reached the core formation stage yet, so it was a little unbearable to not eat for a long time. Tossing the pill in his hand, Chen Feng smiled proudly and said, I'll go see if boss is here. Just because I concocted a high-quality pill, he has to get me something good to eat. Chief Chen, wait a minute. Boss is here. He came the second day after you concocted the pill and has been staying in a cave. The person knew that the boss he was talking about was the leader. In Utopia, only a few people had the right to call him that. Chen Feng frowned and thought to himself, what is boss doing? He has actually stayed here for more than 10 days. How rare. He waved his hand and said, bring me to him. Chapter 233. That person brought Chen Feng to the cave where Yu Qianzhou stayed. There was a red light flashing inside, and no one knew what was going on. With Chen Feng leading the way, that person dared to go in. When the two entered and saw the scene inside, they were dumbfounded. The red light in the cave was rippling, as if there was something wandering in the air. The temperature was extraordinarily high. Chen Feng and his subordinate stood there for a while, and suddenly felt like they were being roasted by the high temperature. With their cultivation, it seemed like they couldn't withstand it. Yu Qianzhou sat on the ground with his legs crossed, naked. There was nothing on his body, and his black hair fluttered in the wind. He sat there like a burning flame, and the red light in the cave was coming from his body. The temperature inside was too high. The two stayed for a while longer, and suddenly felt thirsty. They couldn't bear it anymore, so they had to leave. Stand guard here, and don't let anyone in. Chen Feng said to his subordinate and left. The situation was a little strange, and he needed to find someone who could make the decision. Not long after, Bai Suzhen hurriedly followed him. Seeing Yu Qianzhou sitting there naked, Bai Suzhen looked a little embarrassed. She didn't know what to do. Fortunately, Chen Feng was afraid of the high temperature and didn't dare to come in again, or else it would be even more embarrassing. She didn't know what was going on, so she walked closer to observe. After walking to Yu Qianzhou's side, Bai Suzhen was shocked. The closer she got to Yu Qianzhou, the higher the temperature. When she was a few steps away from him, even with her cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, she couldn't withstand the high temperature, so she had to turn around and retreat. Even she couldn't withstand the high temperature, so how could he sit there as if nothing was wrong? However, from the faint smile on Yu Qianzhou's face, she could tell that he seemed to have gained something, so she shouldn't worry. Thinking about how Yu Qianzhou would stare at the starry sky every night, she guessed that he was cultivating a strange spell. With confidence in her heart, she retreated out of the cave. Bai Suzhen instructed Chen Feng, he is fine. Send someone to stand guard here. Don't let anyone disturb him. Chen Feng respectfully agreed. The former quickly walked back. She was eager to know what secrets were hidden in the starry night sky. At this moment, Yu Qianzhou was immersed in his own world and didn't pay attention to anything happening in the outside world. His core was growing at a visible speed, and he believed that the middle stage of the core formation realm wouldn't be far away. Not long after Bai Suzhen left, 2 purple best quality spirit stones appeared in his palm. The majestic spiritual qi in the spirit stones turned into a trickle and flowed into his body through his hands, transforming into white Jin qi, which was then transformed into white liquid Jin yuan, which was constantly replenishing the consumed Jin yuan in his body. At this moment, the core formation seemed to have absorbed enough fire elements. The fire elements that entered the dantian no longer entered the core formation and began to rush towards the walls of the dantian. Yu Qianzhou could clearly feel that the fire elements were being absorbed through the walls of the dantian and began to spread towards his internal organs. Then, it continued to spread to his meridians, limbs, and bones, all the way to the surface of his body, hair, and skin. Yu Qianzhou was somewhat surprised by this change, but he wasn't afraid. This was because he could feel that the fire elements didn't have any malicious intent towards him. Instead, he faintly felt that they were connected. Since the little ones like it, then come. I want to see how big of a surprise you can give me. With a thought, he sped up the absorption of the spiritual qi from the best quality spirit stones in his hand. The spiritual qi entered his body and was quickly transformed into Zhenyuan. The original purple light of the best quality spirit stone immediately dimmed. When all the purple light was used up, the spirit stone was crushed into ashes and fell from his palm. After the spiritual qi was completely transformed into Zhenyuan, the circulation within his body increased to the limit. The fire elements and the earth fire were continuously absorbed into his body and were stored in his dantian. He didn't know how much time had passed, but when the fire elements filled his whole body, including his meridians and dantian, his body felt as if it was about to burst. He didn't dare to absorb any more and stopped the circulation of the magic art. Looking at the core formation in his dantian, it wasn't far from the middle core formation stage. Yu Qianzhou was wild with joy. He didn't expect that the fire elements in the core formation stage would have such a miraculous effect. Even if he didn't cultivate, he was still constantly refining the Zhenyuan to solidify and enrich himself. At this rate, his cultivation would break through to the middle core formation stage in a few days. Yu Qianzhou opened his eyes and let out a breath. He slowly stood up, feeling that his body was full of energy and extremely comfortable. He probably didn't even know that at the moment he opened his eyes, a ball of leaping flames flashed in each of his pitch-black pupils. It was a very strange sight to behold. Yu Qianzhou was about to leave the cave when he suddenly found his abnormal state. His expression immediately twitched. Damn it! What's going on? How come I'm naked? His gaze fell on the place where he just sat and he suddenly understood. He was afraid that it was related to the fire elements he absorbed. There was a layer of ash on the ground where he just sat. He touched his scattered hair and found that the crown that was originally on top of his head was also gone. It seemed that other than his body, everything else was gone. The crown was made of fine copper. How could the fire elements be so powerful? Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but be afraid. It didn't matter if he was naked now, but if one day he was suddenly burned in front of everyone, it would be terrible. Yu Qianzhou looked at the entrance of the cave. Fortunately, there was no one. He quickly took a set of clothes out of thin air and put them on. After he felt a little safer, he pondered about the fire elements in his body. He didn't know if such a situation would happen again in the future. He couldn't let these little guys do as they pleased. He must control them. Otherwise, if he was not careful, he would accidentally run around naked. How could he let that happen? He revolved his true essence and tried to control them. The result was that the fire elements were very obedient. They went wherever he wanted them to go without any resistance. I wonder what will happen if I force them out of my body? Yu Qianzhou stretched out a finger and slowly forced out some fire elements. Only to hear a puff sound, a small flame stood on his finger and burned. Yu Qianzhou was shocked. Don't turn my finger into a grilled sausage. He quickly patted and blew on it, trying to extinguish it. Huh! Yu Qianzhou was surprised. Not to mention that this flame couldn't be extinguished, why didn't I feel any pain when it burned on my hand? Not even a little heat? How could this be? After his state of mind calmed down, he immediately discovered that this flame was abnormally beautiful. It was much darker than ordinary flames. Moreover, it had a faint feeling that it was connected to his mind. With this feeling, he tried to revolve his true essence to control it. After a try, he found that he could really control it. As he retracted his true essence, the flame gradually shrunk and disappeared back into his finger. Tsk tisk. Yu Qianzhou repeatedly praised. The fire elements were forced out again, and the flame appeared again. After a while, it went back into his body. After a few attempts, he found that the more fire elements he used, the bigger the flame would be. Moreover, he could easily control it. After understanding the mystery, Yu Qianzhou suddenly clenched his fists. His whole body suddenly emitted a raging fire, and he stood in the raging fire unscathed. Looking at the clothes on his body, with the protection of his true essence, they were indeed undamaged. He could completely control them, so there was no need to worry. In the fire, Yu Qianzhou looked around the cave. His eyes fell on a stone wall. Suddenly, a small flame appeared on his finger. With a flash of red light, a charred hole appeared on the stone wall. Chapter 234. Yu Qianzhou's mouth was slightly agape with a look of disbelief. It must be known that the stone walls of this cave had been roasted by the blazing fire below for many years without much change. Yet, a small ball of fire that he had casually flicked out was able to silently burn a hole in the stone wall. Wasn't this a little too powerful? He released his divine sense to investigate the small hole that was burnt out. It was at least 1 meter deep. Yu Qianzhou let out a breath of cold air. It was just a casual flick from him, but it actually had such power. Then, looking at the armor-like flame coat that enveloped his body, he raised a blazing fist and punched towards the wall. Hu Jinyuan quickly shot out with a fireball. Pang! A large hole appeared in the wall. Puff puff puff. The flames that had been compressed by Jinyuan shot out from his 10 fingers like a storm. Immediately, the cave was filled with charred holes. Amazing! Yu Qianzhou smiled with satisfaction. This was a good attack method. However, it seemed like the fire element stored in his body would decrease with every release. The commotion inside alerted the guards outside. 2 of his subordinates jumped in with swords in hand. When they saw Yu Qianzhou covered in flames, their faces were filled with shock. After pausing for a while, they saluted together and said, "Leader. There's nothing here. You guys go out." "That's right, fill this water tank with water," Yu Qianzhou said with a smile in the flames. "Yes." The 2 respectfully retreated. Not long after, water flowed in from a ditch that was dug out in the stone wall. After a while, a pool in the corner of the wall was filled with water. Yu Qianzhou retracted the flames on his body. He took out his flying sword and the mystical golden sand. He held the flying sword in one hand and the mystical golden sand in the other. He released his Jinyuan and forced the 2 items to float above his palm. Suddenly, 2 balls of red demonic flames appeared in his palm and wrapped around the flying sword and the mystical golden sand. The 2 items quickly turned into 2 balls of black and gold liquid. The 2 balls of flames immediately merged into one, and the 2 balls of liquid also fused together. Yu Qianzhou held up the flame with one hand. The flame wrapped around the liquid in his palm rotated rapidly. After thoroughly mixing the flying sword liquid and the mystical golden sand liquid, the flame was pulled up in his palm and elongated like a tornado. The metal liquid also gradually elongated, and a long sword began to take shape in the rotating flame. Suddenly, the shape of the flame changed and instantly turned into a fiery long sword. It gradually shrunk in size from the outside to the inside, and the liquid that was wrapped in it was compressed into a flying sword. Yu Qianzhou stared at the sword and waited for a while before nodding slightly. The long sword's flame-shaped coat quickly retracted from the hilt and retracted back into the palm of the hand from the sword tip. Yu Qianzhou cast a few spells at it. This was a necessary spell to refine a flying sword. Otherwise, no matter how good the sword was, it would not be able to become a royal flying sword. With a wave of his hand, the long sword flew into the air and stabbed straight into the water trough that was filled with water. Fart. A sharp sound rang out. After the water receded, the heat of the long sword was fixed, and it was directly inserted into the bottom of the pool. Yu Qianqiu reached into the water to grab the sword hilt and pulled it out. He bent his finger and flicked the sword. Wang! The long sword let out a crisp dragon roar. The layer of black impurities wrapped around the sword was shaken off, revealing a flying sword with a dark gold color. Yu Qianqiu flicked the sword twice and listened to the buzzing sound. He nodded in satisfaction and then casually slashed at the stone wall. With a light sound, the long sword penetrated into the stone wall and swept out again. It was as effortless as a knife cutting through tofu. Good sword. Yu Qianqiu gently stroked the sword and couldn't help but praise it. The most important thing in refining was the balance of the materials. Alchemy was also the same. The second thing was superb refining skills. Although he didn't have any superb refining skills, with his ability to control fire, he should be able to match the materials. His divine sense locked onto the flying sword in his hand and flew freely in the cave. Finally, with a dong sound, the sword was nailed into the stone wall. Still in high spirits, he picked up the flying swords and mysterious gold sand on the ground and started refining them one by one. When all the flying swords were mixed with mysterious gold sand and refined again, he found that the amount of mysterious gold sand was enough to refine another 100 flying swords. Back at the auction house, he knew that 10 kilograms of mysterious gold sand was enough to refine 200 flying swords. After thinking about it, he felt that even if he used all of them now, it would be useless. Even if he reached the middle stage of core formation, he wouldn't be able to fully unleash the power of 200 flying swords. It would already be very good if he could increase the power of 100 flying swords. Besides, if Chen Feng found out that he took something as good as the mysterious gold sand for himself, he would definitely nag him endlessly. It was better to leave some for him. With a wave of his hand, the 100 flying swords and mysterious gold sand nailed to the wall were all put away. Suddenly, his whole body trembled. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and let out a comfortable moan. Just like that, his cultivation broke through to the middle stage of core formation. It was simply too satisfying. Feeling refreshed, he walked out of the cave. His two subordinates at the cave entrance saluted in unison and said, "Leader. Where's your chief Chen?" Yu Qianqiu asked with his hands behind his back. One of them replied, "Chief Chen is in the alchemy room." The former nodded and said, "Go do your own things. There's no need to watch over me." With that said, he walked away. When he passed by another cave entrance, he suddenly heard someone whispering, "Strange. Did you notice that the temperature of the earth fire has been very unstable these past 2 days? It seems like it's a bit low." Someone replied, "That's right. I also think it's strange." When a cauldron of pills reached a crucial point, the temperature suddenly dropped. In the end, we wasted an entire cauldron of pills. However, the temperature seems to be gradually recovering. Yu Qianqiu listened for a while outside and thought to himself, could it be that they're affected by my fire art? Regardless of whether it's true or not, it seems like I can't absorb fire elements in my own territory in the future. If I want to do it, I have to do it outside. Inside the alchemy room, Chen Feng was squatting in a pile of spiritual herbs, rummaging through something. Suddenly, a flying sword stabbed right in front of him, giving him a fright. At the side, Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "What do you think of this flying sword I refined?" Chen Feng, who had a slightly unhappy expression on his face, casually pulled out the sword from the ground. It wasn't that he looked down on his boss. Yu Qianqiu's pill refining skills were better than his, but in the path of tool refining, Yu Qianqiu wasn't as proficient as him. Chen Feng originally wanted to tactfully attack his boss, but who knew that after taking a look, he would be stunned. He held the sword in front of his eyes with both hands and examined it closely. He mumbled, "The sword's body is one, the blade is sharp, and the color is dark gold. Boss, this flying sword has already reached the grade of a high-grade magic tool. Did you really refine it?" Chen Feng turned around and expressed his doubt. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and called back the flying sword in his hand. Then, he casually threw a bag of things to him and said, "This is for you." Chen Feng caught it and opened it to take a look. Then, he shook his head and said, "I say, so it's mixed with mystic gold sand. What a pity, it's such a waste to give something like this to you. Don't talk nonsense. We'll talk again when you can refine a sword better than this one." Yu Qianzhou couldn't be bothered with him and turned around to go back. A stream of light quickly flew out from the deep valley. Yu Qianzhou floated down to the top of Misty Peak. His cultivation had increased by 1 level, and in addition to the rebirth of the flying sword, the speed of the sword kinesis flight was indeed much faster. At this time, the sky outside was just beginning to brighten. Yu Qianzhou looked around and was instantly stunned. He saw Bai Suzhen standing on the cliff and looking at him. Smiling, he walked over and asked, "Why are you here?" Bai Suzhen smiled indifferently and turned back to look at the gradually fading stars in the sky. She said gently, "You stayed down there for more than a month. Previously, I saw you looking up at the stars every night. I thought it must be related to the stars, so I came to take a look." She naturally couldn't say that she saw him naked, so she thought of coming here to take a look. Yu Qianzhou took a few light steps forward and stood beside her. He smiled and said, "Sister is indeed smart. Not bad, I comprehended something from the changes in the starry sky. It's a pretty good incantation." "What incantation?" Bai Suzhen looked back and asked in surprise. Yu Qianzhou looked at her and took a few steps away. Suddenly, a raging fire burned around his body, illuminating the whole cliff. He, who was wrapped in the fire, casually took out an ordinary flying sword. The flying sword was wrapped in the raging fire and instantly turned into a ball of liquid, which fell to the ground and scattered. After the bewitching fire was restrained into his body, Yu Qianzhou shrugged disapprovingly, as if to tell her that it was this incantation. "What a powerful fire! I can feel its destructive power. I'm afraid that even with my cultivation, I will be burned by it." Brother is indeed a genius, to be able to comprehend such a powerful fire incantation from the changes in the starry sky. Bai Suzhen couldn't hide the admiration in her eyes. Since ancient times, who could create their own cultivation incantations was not a proud son of heaven. She was proud of him. Yu Qianzhou calmly accepted her praise. To be praised by such an outstanding woman was also a happy thing. He walked back to her side and looked at her with a smile. "Big sister, this incantation was created by me. It doesn't have a name yet. Big sister, please give it a name." "You want me to give it a name?" Bai Suzhen's tone revealed a hint of surprise. It should be known that the name of a newly created incantation was very likely to be passed down through the ages along with the name of the person who created the incantation, especially the more powerful incantation. It was rare for Yu Qianzhou to see her reveal such a little girl's expression. He nodded his head blankly. Bai Suzhen lowered her head and muttered to herself. She then raised her head to look at the already white night sky. Her gaze stopped on the most dazzling star for a while. She turned her head and smiled sweetly. "Star flame. Star as in stars, flame as in flames. What do you think about calling it star flame?" Yu Qianzhou's gaze also fell on the star. He nodded and said, "Star flame. All right, this fire incantation will be called star flame. The person who named it is Bai Suzhen." Chapter 235. After learning that he had stayed in the valley for more than a month, Yu Qianzhou went to inspect the troops. Seeing that the houses had been built and that the training was on track, he finally felt at ease. There was no need for him to worry about the other details. Otherwise, what was the point of having so many people? When he returned to the back garden of the Pillar of State General's residence, he realized that Shi Xiaotian, Ling Feng, and the rest were not there. There were a few more mortals with spiritual roots in the garden, and he had recruited them into Utopia. When he walked past the entrance of the garden, he realized that there were many servants cleaning up the general's residence. There were lanterns and colored banners everywhere, and it looked very festive. "Mr. Yu," someone called out to him. Yu Qianqiu saw a smiling Shi Yutian running over and bowing. Yu Qianqiu pouted and said, "Is it going to be a festival? Or are you going to marry a concubine?" Shi Yutian felt awkward and smiled apologetically. "Yes, my father will be back tomorrow." "Oh. The Pillar of State General is coming back." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Find me 10 sets of clothes for the servants, the ones I wore last time." The set that Shi Xiaotian had given him had turned into ashes in the valley, so he had to get a few more sets as backup. Shi Yutian nodded repeatedly and trotted away. Not long after, he personally came back with 10 sets of clothes for the servants. Yu Qianqiu immediately changed his clothes in the garden and walked out of the back garden. Shi Yutian followed behind and said with a smile, "Mister, are you going out?" Yutian is quite familiar with the capital. "Do you want me to lead the way?" Just as he finished speaking, he saw the 2 beautiful wives of the Shi family blocking his way. The 2 ladies wanted to bow to Yu Qianqiu, but they were stopped by Yu Qianqiu. "There's no need to be so polite. When there are many people, I'm a servant of the general's residence." He then bowed to the 2 ladies instead. Si Tuhui tilted her body slightly. Although she did not know who he was, she did not dare to accept his courtesy. On the other hand, Bao Wancher was not interested in him. She accepted his bow and complained to her husband, "Where are you going?" "Madam, I'm going out with Mr." He was looking forward to building a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu, who was at the side, would laugh and say, "I'm going to 10,000 Flower Tower for a stroll. Do you really want to go?" After saying that, he directly walked out. He looked like he wasn't going to stop him. How could Bao Wancher agree? Shi Yutian was immediately stopped by his wife, who would not let him go. Si Tu Hui, who was at the side, smiled faintly. She looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was walking away, and shook her head gently. She did not believe that such a person would go to a dirty place like a brothel. He must have done it on purpose to anger her sister-in-law. This was just her wishful thinking. In fact, Yu Qianqiu really did go to a brothel. However, he didn't go to visit a prostitute. There were too many people in the capital. It was not convenient for him to fly around in the city during the day. If he wanted to leave the city directly, he would fly out. He took out some silver and ate snacks all the way to Myriad Flower Brothel. As soon as he arrived, someone naturally led him in. The winding path led to a secluded place. Behind Myriad Flower Brothel, there was a courtyard that was not small. Ordinary guests could not enter. Such a secluded place in the bustling capital was indeed suitable for living. This was the second time he came here. There was a faint sound of a zither in a small attic deep in the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu could tell that it was a song he taught. He shook his head and went up alone. As soon as he walked up to the attic, the sound of the zither stopped. The allure beauty shouted from inside, "Come in by yourself." After he pushed the door open and went in, he still bowed and greeted, "Mistress." This time, the allure beauty did not tease him like before. She leaned on the zither and rested her chin on her hand. She looked at him and sighed, "Ongquangsung and Daluo sect are really unlucky to have provoked you. Especially Ongquangsung. Now, he can be considered to have been removed from the cultivation world. This is all thanks to Mistress Information. You've been a great help." Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. The allure beauty giggled and lazily leaned back on the chair. She shook her head and said, "You Qianqiu, you're really good at scheming. First, you looted the spirit stone mines of the two great sects and killed all the disciples in the mines. Then, you lured On Kuangsung to send people to guard the mines again. When On Kuangsung's sect was at its weakest, you led people to attack On Kuangsung again. In the end, you took down On Kuangsung in one fell swoop." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He scratched his head and said, "Mistress, what do you mean by this? Why don't I understand? When did I attack On Kuangsung? Keep pretending. Keep pretending." The Allure Beauty sneered and said, "Don't tell me that the hero's men aren't your men. I admit that the hero is my men, but I only looted the 21 spirit stone mines." Mistress, you're saying that someone attacked On Kuangsung? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. "You didn't do it?" The Allure Beauty was puzzled. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, "Mistress, I did it. Is there a need to hide it from you? I did the spirit stone mines, but I really didn't attack On Kuangsung. Mistress, what's going on? Quickly tell me." The Allure Beauty couldn't laugh anymore. She stood up and sized up Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that he didn't seem to be lying, she muttered, "If you didn't do it, then this matter is a little fishy." Her graceful figure circled around the zither platform. She thought for a moment and said, "Half a month ago, not long after On Kuangsung sent people to guard the 6 spirit stone mines, a group of powerful black-clothed masked people suddenly attacked Mount Qingguang. On Kuangsung's tribulation passing stage Qing Nu and ancestor Qing Fu died in battle. Other than the disciples outside, almost everyone else died. Afterwards, someone left a small black flag in On Kuangsung. On it, there were 2 golden words, hero. I originally thought that it was you. But now that I think about it, I'm afraid that the person behind this matter isn't so simple." "What?" Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes. He pinched his chin and said in a deep voice, "In other words, someone did his own thing, but poured dirty water on the hero's banner. Master's wife, who do you think would do such a thing?" "I can't guess." The 100-charm beauty frowned and said, "I originally thought that it was you. So I didn't urge my subordinates to investigate this matter. Then I'll have to ask Master's wife to investigate." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "How could it be so easy to frame me? Some people are tired of living." There was still one thing he didn't say. He was worried that he couldn't find someone to test the power of his Starflame fire technique. The 100-charm beauty heard the trace of coldness in his words. She nodded to him and said, "Don't worry. My 10,000 flower houses information channels are everywhere. As long as you didn't do it, even if we can't thoroughly investigate it, we will still find some clues. Unless he fell from the sky and disappeared on the ground, that's more likely." How could Yu Qianqiu not understand the meaning in her words? This, "fell from the sky and disappeared on the ground," was probably referring to what his group had done last time. She probably also investigated it. Unfortunately, his group was really similar to falling from the sky and disappearing on the ground. He smiled and said, "How long do you think it will take for Master's wife to find some clues? When it comes to investigating information, if my 10,000 flower house is second, I'm afraid no one can be first. 3 days. 3 days is enough. Come back after 3 days." The 100-charm beauty was obviously very confident in her ability to investigate information. Otherwise, she wouldn't have said such words. She said with a charming smile, "After I give you the information, I'll leave it to you to deal with it. I want to see who is more powerful, the real hero or the fake hero." Chapter 236. Yu Qianqiu gave a noncommittal smile and didn't make any comments. According to his own estimation, maybe the fake hero was more powerful than the real one. He admitted that he didn't have an expert who could kill 2 crossing tribulation final stage cultivators at once. Although Bai Suzhen was also at the crossing tribulation final stage, it was hard to say if she could defeat two at once. Moreover, Ong Kwangsung definitely had other crossing tribulation final stage experts. Otherwise, he would have already gone to Qingguang Mountain to find trouble with Ong Kwangsung. Master's wife, during this time, did anything new happen in the cultivation world? Yu Qianzhou naturally wouldn't let a master's wife who was familiar with the cultivation world go to waste. Nothing new, but there is an old thing. The new talent assembly that is held once every 10 years will be held at Supporting Immortals Island in 6 days. This year, Ong Kwangsung will definitely be absent. AI. It's a pity that you have already been expelled from Supporting Immortals Island. Otherwise, you would also be able to witness this grand occasion. The 100-charm beauty teased. It's a bit of a pity. Yu Qianzhou shook his head in agreement. He thought to himself, how do you know that I won't be able to witness this grand occasion? As long as I want to go to Supporting Immortals Island, I can go at any time. However, these words naturally couldn't be said out loud. The news of the Pillar of the State General returning to the capital with 10,000 guards had already spread throughout the capital. It was said that His Majesty the Emperor would personally come out of the city to welcome them. The common people naturally didn't want to give up on this opportunity. To be able to see His Majesty the Pillar of the State General was a rare thing. Therefore, the streets were filled with people. Yu Qianzhou was normally a person who liked crowds. Naturally, he also wanted to join in on the fun. However, this time, because His Majesty the Emperor would personally come out of the city to welcome them, the number of people that could go out to welcome them was limited. Therefore, Shi Yutian, who was in charge of this stall, personally arranged for him to be part of the welcoming team. Lady Li, 2 sons, 2 daughters-in-law, these were the family members. The housekeeper and 4 servants were just in accordance with the rule that a master couldn't have more than 1 servant. Among the servants, there were 3 maidservants. Only the housekeeper and Yu Qianzhou were male. Naturally, it was to make it easier for them to serve their mistress. At the west gate of the capital, the Shi family's master and servant had already arrived at the city gate. Although it was early in the morning, the sun was still quite fierce. Fortunately, they were at the west gate, so the sun wouldn't reach them for a while. Everyone could hide under the tall city walls. As for the top of the city gate tower, His Majesty was up there. The main road out of the city was guarded by layers of majestic imperial guards, not allowing anyone to get close. The family members of the Pillar of the State General were the only exceptions and were allowed to leave the city. Yu Qianzhou looked up from time to time from the city wall. He had never seen what the legendary emperor looked like, and he really wanted to see it. Little Tian, that old man in yellow on the city wall is the emperor? Yu Qianzhou suddenly saw a guy in yellow robes appear on the city wall. He seemed to be very powerful, so he pulled Shi Xiaotian aside and asked. As soon as he said this, everyone's expression changed. Li Hongyang's expression was a bit awkward, but she didn't know what to say. Shi Yutian hurriedly looked at the imperial guards over there. They were quite far away, so he didn't think they could hear him. He then wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Bao Wanshi, on the other hand, was a bit dumbfounded. Someone actually dared to talk about His Majesty like that? Si Tuhui's eyes also flickered. The housekeeper lowered his head, and the 3 maidservants were a bit scared. They didn't know why this new servant was so daring. Not only did he call their master's name, he even dared to look down on His Majesty. Shi Xiaotian didn't raise his head, but smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, can you not do this? You've already crossed the line. According to the law, you will be beheaded." Those who could come here to greet them were all the Shi family's trusted subordinates. Yu Qianzhou didn't care about what he said. He said disdainfully, "Behead me? You can ask him to try. If he gets angry, I will kick him down from the city gate tower right now." Hearing this, everyone was terrified. If these words were to spread, what would happen? Shi Xiaotian almost begged, "Boss, lower your voice. The emperor is protected by the imperial preceptor. The imperial preceptor isn't an ordinary person. He has a high cultivation. Yu Qianzhou was slightly stunned. He remembered something. It seemed that before Bai Suzhen was imprisoned in Angquangceng, she had fought with an imperial preceptor. Thinking about this, he really restrained himself a little. About an hour later, there was movement on the city gate tower. Not long after, a group of civil and military officials escorted a yellow-robed elder out of the city gate. As a family member, she couldn't go to the main road to greet them. She could only follow from the side protected by the imperial guards. As if it was rehearsed, everyone immediately felt a buzzing vibration under their feet. Following that, the neighing of war horses came from afar. When a banner could be seen fluttering in the distance, a general in silver armor had already leaped up the slope. Immediately, a row of generals in battle armor followed behind him. Suddenly, a black mass of cavalry appeared behind them, and with a rumble, they followed the general in front. If this group of people didn't stop and directly charged over, what would the situation be like? The momentum of the tens of thousands of horses galloping over was astonishing. Even the ground over here was trembling. Yu Qianzhou sized up the civil and military officials on the main road. Many of their faces had already changed. It was obvious that they were frightened. Looking at the Shi family side, they were all pleasantly surprised. It was the joy of seeing the master of the family, and a very powerful one at that. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed softly, sigh. I only said a few words and people said I was overstepping my authority. Great General Shi made such a big commotion. Doesn't he know that the emperor is here to greet him? Is he putting on a show to scare the emperor, or is he here to attack the capital? Although his voice was soft, it was enough for the few masters in front to hear. It was unknown whether he was speaking to himself or to others. The Shi family's family members trembled when they heard this. They all turned to look at the main road's emperor. They saw an elder with a sword on his back, who was originally behind the emperor, take a step forward and stand next to the emperor. It seemed like he was protecting the emperor. This time, the Shi family couldn't be happy. It was obvious that they had really frightened the emperor. Yu Qianzhou only saw it now. When he saw that person's clothing, he was stunned. Wasn't that the clothing of Fuxian Island? He couldn't help but ask, who is that old man with the sword on his back? He is the current imperial preceptor. Shi Yu Tian sighed. After being pointed out by Yu Qianzhou, he could also see that his father was a little rash today. Yu Qianzhou nodded silently. No wonder the Li family's dynasty was supported by Fuxian Island. It was indeed so. The silver-armored general at the front suddenly raised his hand and waved when he was about 100 meters away from the welcoming guards. The dense mass of cavalry behind him abruptly reined in their horses and stopped abruptly. It was truly an order that was strictly enforced. The general also slowed down. He rode his horse to a stop about 10 meters away from the guards of honor. He jumped off his horse and threw the reins. There was already someone running over to hold the horse for him. The state pillar general strode in front of the emperor and knelt on one knee. He said, "Subject Shi Wenguang greets your majesty." When he knelt, the army 100 meters away also got off their horses and knelt together. "Long live your majesty!" The shouts shook the sky. Just this formation made the blood of those watching feel a little hot. They were indeed an elite army that had been on the battlefield for a long time. At this moment, the old emperor finally smiled. He waved his hand and signaled for all the soldiers to rise. The imperial preceptor beside him said loudly, "His Majesty has an order. Rise." His voice was louder than a loudspeaker. It immediately showed the imperial preceptor's ability. After that, there was a scene of love between the emperor and his subjects. Yu Qianzhou wasn't interested in that. What he cared about was how deep the imperial preceptor's cultivation was. However, it was clearly higher than his because he couldn't see through it. In the end, the general's 10,000 guards set up camp outside the city. The general himself received the honor of being in the same carriage as the emperor. He went directly to the palace and the palace prepared a banquet for him. The great general's family only had a quick meeting with him, which was considered a greeting. To Yu Qianzhou, he was just here to watch the show. When he came back, he would do what he had to do. He planned to stay for a few days and wait for the 100 Charms beauty to get news about the fake hero. Then, he would go to Fuxian Island to see if he could see the new talent assembly that was held once every 10 years. After 2 days, Yu Qianzhou wanted to find the 100 Charms beauty. However, he saw Shi Xiaotian walking in with an unhappy expression. He couldn't help but ask, "What happened?" Shi Xiaotian shook his head and said, "It's nothing. Today, during the morning court, someone criticized my father. He said that my father has an army and often follows him. He wants His Majesty to take back my father's military power." Yu Qianzhou smiled and took over the topic. Then, the old emperor rejected that person's criticism and reprimanded him. "He even praised your father." Shi Xiaotian was stunned. "Who told you that?" "It just happened not long ago. My big brother told me when he came back." "How did you know?" "Damn. I've seen too many TV dramas in my previous life." Yu Qianzhou put on an unfathomable expression and smiled. "I don't need anyone to tell me. I guessed at the moment you said it." Then, he walked around the hall with his hands behind his back and sighed. "If I'm not wrong, this is just the beginning. There will still be people who will continue to criticize your father. Sigh. Looks like your Shi family has reached a point of life and death." His words were too alarmist. Shi Xiaotian was shocked. His expression twitched. "Boss, you must be joking. A general who can command millions of people can't be stupid." Yu Qianzhou patted his shoulder and sighed. "Help me send a message to your father. I believe he will understand." "What message?" Seeing that his boss didn't seem to be joking, he became nervous. "Peace is decided by the general. He is not allowed to see peace." Yu Qianzhou sighed. "Tell your father. He will naturally know what it means. I'm going out to do something." Then, he wobbled out. As he walked, he shook his head and said, "It's all because of military power." Chapter 237. When Yu Qianzhou arrived at Myriad Flower House's side courtyard loft, the Allure Beauty immediately tossed a jade archive to him. Yu Qianzhou inserted his divine sense into the jade archive and took a look. To his surprise, it was a topographic map. Based on the markings, it was clearly located in a deep mountain not far from the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianzhou asked, "Mistress, what is this?" The Allure Beauty was lazily lying on her side on the soft couch. Her body was moving up and down. She supported her cheek with one hand and said with a smile, "There is a small village there. The people in the village rely on hunting for a living. There used to be a cave deep in the mountains nearby. However, for some reason, the cave suddenly disappeared more than 10 years ago. It wasn't until the day on Guangceng was attacked that a villager accidentally discovered the cave reappeared and saw hundreds of people entering it. The villager thought it was strange and wanted to see who those people were. However, when he got closer, he discovered that the cave had disappeared again. When my men arrived, they discovered that the cave had been sealed off by a formation." Yu Qianzhou waved the jade archive in his hand and asked, "The small village that mistress mentioned is here?" The temptress nodded coquettishly from her couch. "Mistress, are you saying that the attack on Guangceng has something to do with the 100 Flowers Valley?" Yu Qianzhou frowned. Speaking of the 100 Flowers Valley, he recalled the 4 treasures of the Snow Valley that were auctioned off by the Wu clan. That Yan Juexing was very mysterious. "I don't know if it has anything to do with the 100 Flowers Valley, but I'm guessing that the incident with Onquangsung must have something to do with these hundreds of people. The location of the cave is in your Jade Archive. If you're interested, you can go check it out yourself. The temptress smiled. Yu Qianzhou put away the Jade Archive and clicked his tongue. Mistress, you're amazing indeed. You even know what happened in a small village in the secular world. Stop flattering me. If you have the time to flatter me, you might as well massage my legs. The allure beauty giggled. As she spoke, a fair and plump jade-like leg stretched out from the red muslin. In the end, Yu Qianzhou was so embarrassed that he found a random excuse and ran away. He was afraid of his mistress. If this continued, he reckoned that one day he would be tempted to the point where he would lose his sense of propriety. 2 days later, Yu Qianzhou was sitting in the main hall of the general's mansion's back garden. He was tapping on the table and counting the time. In one more day, it would be the new talent assembly on Fuxian Island. However, the people who were supposed to come were not here yet. Unknowingly, the sky had already darkened. Shi Xiaotian hurriedly walked in and said, "Boss, my father wants to see you." Yu Qianzhou laughed coldly in his heart. Still putting on airs in front of me? I don't care what great general you are. He crossed his legs and leisurely shook his head, saying, "I'm not going." Shi Xiaotian was startled. He didn't expect that his boss wouldn't give him face and was begging him. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and interrupted, "Don't say any more. If your father really wants to see me, ask him to come over personally. I don't want to interfere in his matters. Seeing him is already giving you face. Boss, you." Sigh. Shi Xiaotian stomped his feet and turned to leave. Not long later, Shi Xiaotian led a tall and sturdy middle-aged man in. It was the pillar of the state general, Shi Wenguang. Yu Qianzhou sat on the chair and didn't move. He smiled and sized up the person who came. This great general was wearing a plain robe, but it couldn't conceal his imposing aura. Especially that domineering aura. It was obvious that he had been in a high position for a long time and tempered by blood and iron. The two of them sized each other up. Shi Xiaotian, who was at the side, felt a little awkward. The introduction was already a little redundant. At this moment, a person slowly walked out from the back of the main hall. The burly Guan Yu, who wore green robes and a green hat, stood at Yu Qianzhou's side with an extraordinary air and a sword at his waist. Guan Yu raised his hand and stroked his long beard. He narrowed his eyes coldly at Shi Wenguang. Guan Yu's bearing was rare in the world. Coupled with the fact that he had led troops in Utopia for many years, there was nothing to say about his bearing. Shi Wenguang took a glance and cheered inwardly, "What a great man." However, Shi Xiaotian felt that Guan Yu looked familiar. He didn't know where he had seen him before. However, the atmosphere of his father and his boss opposing each other made him feel a little uncomfortable. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, was a little displeased with Shi Wenguang's dignified appearance. Therefore, he got the more dignified Guan Yu to hold the fort. Yu Qianzhou looked at the anxious Shi Xiaotian and looked like he was giving him face. He stood up and cupped his hands at Shi Wenguang. "Pillar of the State General, I've heard a lot about you." Shi Wenguang also cupped his fists and said, "I've also heard a lot about Mr. Yu's fame in the cultivation world. I didn't expect you to be a guest in my residence." "Oh. Does the general know about the cultivation world as well?" Yu Qianzhou was a little surprised. He looked at Shi Xiaotian. It seemed like Shi Xiaotian didn't know much about him in the cultivation world. Mr. saved my son in Onquangsung and then joined Fuxian Island. He beat up the grandson of Onquangsung sect leader in Hundred Flowers Valley. He beat up the grandson of Daluo sect leader in Hat Island. After that, he killed the grandson of Onquangsung sect leader. Now, he's been expelled from Fuxian Island, causing a storm in the cultivation world. Some people even suspect that the looting of Daluo sect and Onquangsung spirit stone mines, as well as the extermination of Ang Guangcang's entire family, was also done by Mr. Everyone in the cultivation world knows about what Mr. has done. Shi Wenguang revealed Yu Qianzhou's deeds in the cultivation world as if he was familiar with them. Yu Qianzhou and Guan Yu looked at each other. They clapped and smiled. Amazing! As expected of the pillar of the nation. Even the matters of the cultivation world can't be hidden from you. Shi Wenguang also smiled. Mr. took a stroll in the courtyard when the entire cultivation world put a bounty on his head, but no one could do anything to him. I'm also very impressed. Shi Xiaotian was puzzled. Father, I don't know about these things. How did you know? After you joined the cultivation world, I spent a lot of manpower and money to finally get to know a few rogue cultivators. My purpose was to understand your situation. Who knew that they were just SOSO in the cultivation world? I accidentally learned about Mr. Yu's name from them. Although I don't know much about the cultivation world, I can see that they admire Mr. very much. Mr. seems to be a legend in the cultivation world, Shi Wenguang explained. It's just a bandit's name. It's not worth mentioning. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and smiled bitterly. I wonder if the rogue cultivators that you know about me in the general's residence? Shi Wenguang understood that he was afraid that the rogue cultivators would leak the secret of him being in the general's residence. He immediately waved his hand. Don't worry, Mr. I understand some things. If Mr.'s whereabouts are leaked, our Shi family will be involved in the disputes of the cultivation world. That will be a disaster. Seeing that Shi Wenguang understood everything, Yu Qianzhou smiled. Let's get back to the main topic. Why did you want to see me? I have a lot of troops in my hands. Some people are already panicking. I'm afraid that a storm is coming for me. Mr. wants my son to bring a message to me. Don't you want to help me? Shi Wenguang said indifferently. It's easy to talk to smart people. Yu Qianzhou turned his head and asked, what does the general plan to do? Peace is decided by the general. I won't allow the general to see peace. Mr.'s words hit the nail on the head. My only mistake wasn't pacifying the 6 nations. As long as the war continues, my Shi family might be able to survive for a long time. Now, I'm afraid that I will have to hand over my military power. I'm afraid that some people won't let my Shi family off even after I hand over my military power. This is also the reason why I've been hesitating for the past few days. Shi Wenguang's words could be considered honest. Huh. Since you came to see me today, you must have made up your mind. That's good. You're a smart man, so I won't beat around the bush. Yu Qianzhou's expression turned solemn. The military power is your capital to protect your family. You can't hand it over. In short, you must control your troops. Once the opportunity comes, you must directly replace the Li dynasty. Shi Xiaotian was dumbfounded. His father frowned. That's not difficult. It's just that the Li family has the support of the cultivation world supporting Immortals Island. Does Mr. have a way to resolve this worry? The cultivation world won't interfere in the secular world's affairs. General only needs to conserve your energy and don't stir up trouble. Supporting Immortals Island won't brazenly interfere in the secular world's affairs. Otherwise, they won't be able to explain themselves in the cultivation world. As for some small troubles, there will naturally be people to resolve them for you. When the opportunity comes, I will inform you to mobilize the army. Yu Qianzhou smiled. Mister, why are you helping my Shi family? Shi Wenguang finally voiced out his doubts. First, I won't ignore Xiaotian's troubles. Second, supporting Immortals Island has been the #1 in the cultivation world for a long time. It's time for someone else to take over. Third, I want my family to have a peaceful life. Yu Qianzhou smiled. Is General satisfied with this explanation? At this moment, Shi Yotian's voice came from outside. Is father in? The imperial preceptor is here. Chapter 238. The few people in the hall exchanged glances. Shi Wenguang frowned and said, "What is he doing here?" Grand Preceptor, this is a forbidden area." Before Shi Yutian could finish his sentence, he heard another person snort coldly. Following that, Shi Yotian's pleading voice could be heard. "Grand Preceptor, Grand Preceptor." Shi Wenguang looked at Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that the latter nodded, he shouted, "Yu Tian, let him in." At the same time, Yu Qianzhou said to Guan Yu, "Yunchang, step aside." After saying that, he sent him back to Utopia. The Shi father and son, who were watching the door, did not notice Guan Yu's sudden disappearance. Shi Yutian accompanied an old man with a sword on his back in fear and trepidation. The latter walked past them arrogantly and arrived at the top of the hall. He then turned around to size them up. Yu Qianzhou, who was dressed like a servant, did not attract his attention. His gaze landed on Shi Xiaotian and paused. He said with slight surprise, "General Shi, this must be the third young master." He could clearly see through Shi Xiaotian's cultivation, but he could not see through Yu Qianzhou. "That's right." Shi Wenguang did not hold back. With Yu Qianzhou here, he more or less had some confidence. Although he did not know how powerful Yu Qianzhou was, he could tell from the itinerant cultivators he knew that Yu Qianzhou should be someone important in the cultivation world. His abilities should not be too bad. Unbeknownst to him, Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was only at the middle stage of the core formation realm. It was far inferior to the Grand Preceptor's early-stage nascent soul cultivation. "Yu Tian, leave us first." Shi Wenguang seemed to sense that the Grand Preceptor had come with ill intentions. He first ordered the civil official's son, who could not be of much help, to leave. The Grand Preceptor looked at Shi Xiaotian and stroked his beard. "I didn't expect the third young master of the general's residence to be at the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm. This is really surprising. May I know which sect you are from?" He had to ask clearly. He was here on a mission. It would not be good if he offended some powerful sect. "My son is just a rogue cultivator. He doesn't belong to any sect." Shi Wenguang naturally wouldn't say that his son was An Kuangceng's son. Even if he said it now, it would be useless. An Kuangceng's family had already been exterminated. It would be shameful to say it. Moreover, his son had escaped and returned. He cupped his fists and said, "Imperial Preceptor, what brings you here so late at night?" Hearing that he was just a rogue cultivator, the State Preceptor's attitude became a little more arrogant. He looked at Shi Wenguang with an expressionless face and said, "His Majesty has a message for me to pass on to you. His Majesty said that there are people who are denouncing General for raising troops for self-importance." Initially, I did not want to pay attention to them. However, the denouncing has been incessant these few days and it seems to be getting more and more intense. I am deeply disturbed by it. On second thought, for the peace of the imperial court and your reputation, it might not be a bad thing for you to hand over your military power. So I sent the imperial advisor to persuade you not to disappoint me. General Shi, I have conveyed His Majesty's decree. What do you think? His Majesty is still waiting for me to report back. The State Preceptor stared at Shi Wenguang and said coldly. Shi Wenguang glanced at Yu Qianzhou and sneered, "I don't know what wrong I have done that His Majesty wants to take away my military power. What if I am not willing to hand it over?" The State Preceptor said with a smile, "His Majesty also said that General has worked hard for many years and has made great contributions. It is better for you to return from the border early to rest. If General really wants to disobey my good intentions, the State Preceptor can handle it according to the circumstances." Shi Wenguang glared at him and a murderous aura rose. He said in a deep voice, "How does the State Preceptor intend to handle it according to the circumstances?" The State Preceptor laughed sinisterly, "General Shi, since the words have been spoken, I will tell you clearly. Either you take the initiative to resign from His Majesty during the morning assembly tomorrow, or I will execute you, the traitor who disobeyed His Majesty's orders, right now. You can choose between the two. General Shi, I believe you are aware of my methods. Don't count on luck. Hee. I am dying of laughter. When there is no tiger in the mountain, the monkey acts as the king. Since when did supporting Immortal Island have such an arrogant person? He is even more arrogant than Feng Xiangtian. Yu Qianzhou no longer had the appearance of a servant with his head lowered. He chuckled with his hands behind his back. As soon as Yu Qianzhou spoke, Shi Wenguang's heart that was hanging in the balance was at ease. He cupped his hands at him and said, "Mister, how do you think I should reply to the state preceptor?" The state preceptor was looking at the servant in front of him in shock. This person actually knew about supporting Immortal Island and sect master Feng Xiangtian? Yu Qianzhou stared at him coldly and put on a fake smile. What bullsh** T state preceptor? Reply my ass. Who exactly are you? The state preceptor's tone was slightly flustered. At first, he thought that the other party was an ordinary person. Only now did he realize that it was because he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation. He was originally a nascent soul realm cultivator of supporting Immortal Island. On the path of cultivation, there was no hope for him to improve, so he came to the secular world to be the state preceptor. This state preceptor might seem impressive in the eyes of the secular world, but in the eyes of the disciples of supporting Immortal Island, it was a place that they weren't willing to come to. Which cultivator would be willing to act like a watchdog and protect a mortal? So what if that mortal was the emperor? As long as one had a bit of cultivation, it was easy for them to enjoy anything they wanted in the secular world. However, those with low cultivation couldn't come, and those with high cultivation couldn't be bothered to come. Thus, every generation of state preceptor, supporting Immortal Island would choose an average nascent soul realm cultivator. To put it bluntly, if the people from the cultivation world wanted to cause trouble, how could a nascent soul realm cultivator stop them? In short, as long as supporting Immortal Island didn't fall, the dynasty that it supported wouldn't fall. It was the duty of the cultivators sent to protect the emperor. However, it was a disgrace to the supporting Immortal Island to act like a lackey to the emperor. Humph. Yu Qianzhou snorted and said proudly with his hands behind his back, Yu Qianzhou. Ah. You are Yu Qianzhou? State preceptor exclaimed and his face turned pale. The person in front of him was actually Yu Qianzhou who caused chaos in the cultivation world. He didn't expect to meet him. He didn't know whose cultivation was higher, but a person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. How could a person who could kill sect leader on Guangceng be someone with an undeserved reputation? The long sword on his back was already in his hand. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and hurriedly retreated to the door. Shi Wenguang revealed a trace of surprise. Although he had heard of Yu Qianzhou's deeds, he didn't have a direct understanding of it. He didn't expect that Yu Qianzhou's name could scare the state preceptor to this extent. Shi Xiaotian's face was filled with envy. Boss had actually become so powerful after leaving him for so many years. Yu Qianzhou closed in step by step and sneered, "Since you know my name, do you think I will let you go?" With a "hoo" sound, a ball of bright red flames suddenly ignited around his body. The surrounding wooden furniture and other things were immediately roasted to the point of sizzling and emitting smoke, as if they were going to catch on fire at any time. Shi Wenguang, who was at the back, was on the verge of collapsing from the high temperature. He couldn't even breathe through his nose and mouth. Shi Xiaotian immediately released his vital energy to protect his father and retreat far away. However, from the looks of it, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Yu Qianzhou didn't expect the fire to be so powerful. He immediately suppressed the temperature of the fire. Otherwise, not only would the house burn, but even the state pillar general would also be roasted. He had already become a man of fire, but he was still sneering in the fire. It made everyone's hair stand on end. What kind of magic art was this? The state preceptor was already dumbfounded. By the time he reacted and wanted to run, he only saw a red light flash past on both sides. The door had already been sealed by a sea of fire. He looked to his left, right, and roof. There was no fire on the ground, but he didn't know how to burrow underground. Since he was forced to this point, he could only give it his all. There was no point in being afraid. The flying sword in his hand flashed and turned into a cold light that shot towards Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly and pointed with his finger. A pillar of fire shot towards the flying sword. However, the state preceptor's cultivation was much higher than Yu Qianzhou's. The flying sword immediately forced Yu Qianzhou's pillar of fire back. However, the fire released by the latter was too powerful. When the flying sword was about a meter away from Yu Qianzhou, it had already turned into liquid metal and flowed on the ground. Yu Qianzhou immediately swung his palm towards the state preceptor. He clenched his fist and the surrounding wall of fire wrapped around the state preceptor. Ah! The state preceptor didn't even manage to scream before he turned into nothingness. When Yu Qianzhou opened his fist again, the raging fire was quickly sucked back into his palm. A pile of ashes belonging to the state preceptor scattered on the ground. Chapter 239. After restraining the flames, Yu Qianzhou felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. This was the first time he used his own strength to kill an original infant-stage cultivator. He didn't expect it to be so easy. After reaching the middle stage of core formation, his ability to control fire had improved. The few guards of the general's mansion were standing outside at this time. The commotion just now had alarmed them, but as soon as they arrived outside, they saw that the raging fire had sealed the door. When they saw a flaming man inside putting away the raging fire, they all looked at each other in dismay. Shi Wenguang stepped out and waved his hand. The guards bowed and jumped over the wall. Yu Qianzhou of the cultivation world lives up to his name. My horizons have been broadened today. Shi Wenguang stepped back and clapped his hands in amazement. He didn't have the chance to see such a scene usually. Amazing! Amazing! Shi Xiaotian exclaimed in admiration as he touched the furniture that was already giving off the smell of burnt wood. Yu Qianzhou wasn't going to be blinded by the father and son's praise. He said solemnly, "There's no time to lose. General, leave the city and meet up with the army outside. It's best to return to the western border tonight." This. Shi Wenguang looked outside and hesitated. Knowing that he was worried about his family, Yu Qianzhou shouted, "Call your mother, brother, and sister-in-law over." Understood. Shi Xiaotian ran out quickly. "General, please listen to me. First, as long as you return to the western border as soon as possible, the Shi residence will be the safest place. Second, with your family here, the emperor will know that you won't rebel. He won't dare to provoke you. Third, when you return, try not to stir up trouble with the imperial court. Just do what you need to do, just do what you need to do. In short, make sure that the 2 million soldiers are firmly in your hands. As long as the Li family dynasty is not in a precarious situation, supporting Immortal Island will not interfere with worldly affairs. This will give us time to decide the outcome of the battle." Yu Qianzhou quickly analyzed the situation. Sigh. My Shi clan has been loyal for generations. I didn't think it would end up like this. Shi Wenguang sighed and a trace of decisiveness flashed across his face. He nodded. "Mr. is right. It's decided. It's good that General understands." After Yu Qianzhou finished speaking, he waved his hand, and a group of black-clothed masked men appeared on both sides. He had just contacted Guan Yu with his divine sense and arranged this. Shi Wenguang looked at the two sides in astonishment. He had led troops for a long time, so he could naturally feel the military temperament of these two teams. Yu Qianzhou didn't explain to him, so he didn't ask. However, Yu Qianzhou's extraordinary ability to make people appear out of thin air made him more confident. Not long after, the Shi family arrived at the back garden that was normally off-limits. When they saw the two groups of black-clothed men, they were shocked. Everyone except Shi Xiaotian was baffled to learn that the great general was going to rush back to the western border overnight. Wasn't he coming all the way here to attend the royal wedding? Why did they have to go back so soon? In the face of his wife's earnest inquiry, Shi Wenguang felt a little guilty. However, sometimes there was no need for his family to worry too much about what a man did, so there was no need for him to explain. Shi Wenguang glanced at the members of the Gu family and shouted, "Guards!" 7 or 8 people immediately appeared from outside. They were the Shi family's henchmen, and they walked over to greet the great general. Shi Wenguang nodded and suddenly bowed to Yu Qianzhou. "I'll leave the safety of my family in Mr.'s hands." He was entrusting his family to Yu Qianzhou in front of everyone, causing the group of people to look at each other in dismay. They didn't know what he was doing. Only Shi Xiaotian knew that from today onwards, the Shi family would embark on the path of rebellion. Yu Qianzhou supported him and said sincerely, "The important matter is the most important. Is there anything else the general wants to say to the family?" Shi Wenguang shook his head, "There's no time to lose, let's go." Yu Qianzhou nodded and shouted to a group of black-clothed masked men, "Team 1, spread out and hide around the general's residence. Before I return, kill anyone who enters or leaves the general's residence without mercy." The moment this order was given, the women immediately felt a little alarmed, not knowing what was going on. "Yes." The team of black-clothed masked men saluted and quickly shot out. "Team 2. Follow me." After giving the order, a flying sword flew out, and Yu Qianzhou directly carried the general and flew out. The remaining black-clothed men followed. The head of the family had left just like that, and a group of people who could fly suddenly appeared. The remaining people felt that something was wrong. Shi Xiaotian smiled and comforted them, "Everyone, don't worry. It's nothing. Father has urgent military affairs and has to rush back to deal with it." Bao Wancher and Situ Hui looked at each other with complicated expressions. The army that had been stationed in the western suburbs of the capital for the past few days suddenly broke camp. The army set off, and Shi Wenguang ordered 3,000 cavalrymen to stay 1 li away from the army. 3,000 cavalrymen led the way, and the army of 10,000 rushed west overnight. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, sent a team to protect Shi Wenguang and gave a death order that Shi Wenguang must be safely sent back to the army camp at the western border. In Fuxian Island's myriad fragrance garden, a man and woman were burning dry firewood. Yu Qianzhou stayed in the general's residence for a day, and seeing that there was no movement from the imperial court, he reckoned that there was no big problem. However, he still carefully set up defenses in the general's residence before coming to Fuxian Island. After finding out the location of the new Excellence Assembly, Yu Qianzhou changed into Fuxian Island's clothes and swaggered over. However, when people walked towards him, he would still avoid them, and thus took many detours. Fortunately, he was still familiar with Fuxian Island, so he wouldn't get lost. He turned left and right until he reached the seaside, and he reckoned that he wouldn't meet anyone. Who knew that after walking a few steps, he would faintly hear someone calling out, "Yu Qianzhou," scaring him. He looked around but didn't see anyone. Then, he heard a voice that seemed to be coming from the other side of the rock. After listening carefully, it didn't seem like someone was calling him, but someone was talking about him. The voice was somewhat familiar. Thus, he sneakily climbed up the rock and stuck his head out to take a look. He was delighted when he saw who it was. It was none other than his old acquaintances, Ko Xuehua, Murong Xian, and Mei Yinhong from Myriad Fragrance Garden, Xiao Wanqing from Enron Pavilion, and Gu Qingyun from Cultivation Pavilion. Because these people were friends with Yu Qianzhou, they often came in contact with each other. After Yu Qianzhou was expelled from the sect, they would often gather together to reminisce about Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou's current position just happened to be downwind, so he could hear their conversation. After listening carefully, it turned out that the topic revolved around him. The concern in their words touched the eavesdroppers. TSK. This brat Gu Qingyun's luck with women is not shallow. One person with 4 beauties, should I go out and meet them? Yu Qianzhou was somewhat hesitant, but in the end, he clenched his teeth and stood on the rock. Who is this? They are actually hiding here talking about love. A voice came, and the 5 people sitting on the beach were immediately startled. They abruptly stood up and looked back. A person on the rock was smiling at them, and they couldn't believe their eyes. Xiao Wanqing said in surprise, Yu Qianzhou, it's you. She covered her mouth with her hand and looked around carefully. He. Yu Qianzhou jumped down from the rock with a mischievous smile, and walked towards them. He said with a smile, everyone is in a good mood. You actually came here to talk about love. Gu Qingyun, aren't you a little too unscrupulous to enjoy the 4 beauties alone? Nonsense. Xiao Wanqing directly kicked his leg, but the joy on her face couldn't be concealed. Ko Xiuhua looked around again and said worriedly, Yu Qianzhou, how dare you return to supporting Immortal Island? Beauty Ko, do you think there's a place in this world that I don't dare to go? Yu Qianzhou said arrogantly. The few of them smiled non-committally. Murong Xian, who had always been a man of few words, suddenly exclaimed, Yu Qianzhou, how did you get in here? Could it be that even the supporting Immortal Island's protective formation couldn't stop you? Yu Qianzhou still replied arrogantly, Beauty Murong, do you think there's a place in this world that can stop me? He then waved at Mei Yinhong and said, Mimi, you've become much prettier. Gu Qingyun looked at his supporting Immortal Island uniform and couldn't help but laugh. Don't tell me you're still wearing supporting Immortal Island's uniform to swindle people outside? It made the women laugh again. Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes at him and said, Boy, don't forget what you said in the Devil's Domain. You said that as long as you can leave the Devil's Domain alive, you'll follow me. This time, I'm here to fulfill my promise. Gu Qingyun was stunned. He really did say something like that in the past. The women were also stunned. They thought to themselves, is he really here for this? These casual words made Yu Qianzhou think for a moment. Thus, he said with a meaningful smile, is there anyone else who wants to follow me? It's good to be with me. I guarantee that you'll be able to eat and drink well every day. They looked at each other. Xiao Wanqing asked timidly, Yu Qianzhou, will it be dangerous to follow you? I heard that the entire cultivation world is after you. Chapter 240. Danger? What danger? Don't you see that I'm alive and well? Yu Qianzhou smiled at them and said, do you want to leave with me? The few of them looked at each other, not knowing how to answer. It should be known that Yu Qianzhou was expelled from the sect. If they left now, they would be treated as traitors and it would be worse than being expelled from the sect. Although they have a good relationship with Yu Qianzhou, they wouldn't betray the sect for him because the consequences would be too severe. If supporting Immortal Island wanted to kill the traitors would have a miserable ending because supporting Immortal Island was too powerful. Ko Xiuhua frowned and said, Yu Qianzhou, we can't leave with you. You should leave supporting Immortal Island quickly. Don't worry, we will pretend that we never saw you and won't tell anyone that you were here. The others nodded silently and expressed their agreement to Ko Xiuhua's words. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, look at you guys. I was just casually saying it and you guys took it seriously. Why don't you think about it? It's hard for me to come in alone, how can I bring you guys out? Hearing this, the few of them heaved a sigh of relief. Xiao Wanqing said, Yu Qianzhou, don't joke about this in the future. It's making everyone feel awkward. Then why did you come to supporting Immortal Island this time? Gu Qingyun asked. Isn't there a new talent assembly today? I purposely came to take a look. Yu Qianzhou laughed and said. You are mistaken. Today is the day that all the sects are staying. The proper competition is tomorrow. Xiao Wanqing rushed to answer. Once the atmosphere was relaxed, she started to jump around again. So it's like that. Yu Qianzhou muttered to himself. Ko Xuehua sighed and said, It's not convenient for us to stay with you. You should leave as soon as possible. Once you are discovered, it will be hard for you to leave. Let's go. Gathering too many people here will only bring trouble to Yu Qianzhou. The last sentence was directed at the others. Ko Xuehua's cultivation was the highest among them. According to the seniority of the supporting Immortals Island, she was the teacher of the others. No one objected to what she said. Gu Qingyun patted Yu Qianzhou's shoulder and sighed, Then take care of yourself. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand at them and chuckled, It's fine, you guys can leave first. Just as he waved his hand, the 5 of them felt a wave of divine sense envelop them. Before they could react, the 5 of them on the beach felt their vision blur, and their surroundings changed. A man's heart is hard to fathom. Don't blame me. If you had agreed earlier, I wouldn't have had the heart to let you suffer the pain of having your natal primordial spirits forcibly removed. Sigh. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sighed as he muttered to himself for a while. Then, he walked along the beach. The new Excellence Assembly was on the outer island of the supporting Immortals Island. The distance between the 2 islands wasn't far and there was a stone bridge connecting them. Even though it was only a small island, it was enough to welcome guests from all over. There were many courtyards built on the island. They were all prepared for such an event. Naturally, it was for the convenience of the various sections. Yu Qianzhou hid at a place not far from the bridge. When there were no more supporting Immortals Island disciples crossing, he swaggered over. Actually, this short distance of tens of meters could be crossed easily with his sword. However, he had stayed on the supporting Immortals Island before. He knew that this seemingly harmless distance might be hiding something strange. Many people were looking at the world's #1 supporting Immortals Island from the beach. They were all disciples of other sections. Yu Qianzhou walked through them openly. He could tell that most of them were Qi Refinement Realm disciples. As long as they weren't supporting Immortals Island disciples, they wouldn't be able to recognize him. Under the envious gazes of the various sects' disciples, Yu Qianzhou wore the supporting Immortals Island's uniform and walked around with his head held high. Occasionally, there would be flying artifacts from other sects descending from the sky. Then, supporting Immortals Island disciples would immediately go over to arrange accommodations. After familiarizing himself with the surrounding terrain, the setting sun had already dyed the entire sea golden. Those who were supposed to come from the various sects had arrived. The supporting Immortals Island sent disciples to invite the various sect leaders and elders to welcome them. Naturally, the accompanying disciples wouldn't be able to participate in such an event. After watching the various sect leaders and elders leave for the supporting Immortals Island, Yu Qianzhou chuckled. He circulated his energy to force out his cultivation base. He knew that his body was unique. If he didn't want to display his cultivation base, others wouldn't be able to tell. However, he wanted to let others see it now. After making all the necessary preparations, he was about to execute his plan. He took out a jade archive and walked toward a sect's courtyard. Although the supporting Immortals Island was safe, the various sects still sent 1 or 2 people to guard the courtyard's entrance. Judging from their uniform, Yu Qianzhou didn't recognize them. They should be from a small sect. The 2 disciples guarding the entrance saw that he was wearing the supporting Immortals Island's uniform. Since they couldn't see through his cultivation base, they immediately bowed and said, "The disciples of the Rising Sun sect greet you, Senior. May I know what brings you here?" So they're from the Rising Sun sect. Yu Qianzhou didn't force his way in. He stopped and waved the jade archive in his hand. With a smile on his face, he said, I've been ordered to verify the members of the various sections. I'll have to trouble Rising Sun sect's fellow sect members to cooperate with me. Please ask the disciples in the courtyard to come out for a moment. It won't take up too much of your time. His attitude was amiable and his words were courteous. The two disciples guarding the entrance could feel the demeanor of the world's #1 sect. One of the disciples guarding the entrance immediately bowed and said, Senior, please wait for a moment. I'll first ask for instructions from the sect's elder who stayed behind. Yu Qianzhou raised his hand and gestured for the disciple to go ahead. He smiled and said, It's all right. I'll just wait. The more courteous he was, the more the disciple dared not delay. He immediately ran into the house. Not long after, a group of people came out from the courtyard. There were at least 30 of them, and all of them gathered in the courtyard. They were probably the people who were preparing to participate in the competition. Finally, an old man walked out from the house. The old man glanced at Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that he was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, he waved his hand and said, Let him in. Yu Qianzhou couldn't see through the old man's cultivation base. Obviously, it was higher than his. He immediately bowed and said, Disciple of the Pavilion of Cultivation, Gu Qingyun, greets Senior. The old man frowned and said, Verify the members of the various sects? I've never seen supporting Xian Island having such a rule in the past years. Why is there such a rule this year? Yu Qianzhou said respectfully, It's just that the cultivation world isn't very peaceful these days. Our sect is worried that some small fries will take this opportunity to cause trouble. This is also for the safety of all sections. Please forgive us, Senior. His actions and tone gave the old man enough face. Yes. Supporting Xian Island is really thoughtful. The old man nodded and said, Then hurry up. Senior, I want to ask again. Are all the disciples of the Rising Sun sect here? After I've registered them in the Jade Archive, I'll make a copy for the disciples guarding the sect. Don't miss any of them to avoid unnecessary trouble, Yu Qianzhou said. His words were reasonable. If not all the disciples were here, the guards of supporting Xian Island would find out that they had sent more people. At the very least, they would be interrogated. The old man immediately turned around and looked at the disciples who had gathered together. He nodded and said, That's right. Except for the elders who attended the banquet, all the other disciples are here. Then I'll start now. Please forgive me, Senior. Yu Qianzhou pretended to pick up the Jade Archive in his hand. He opened his palm towards the crowd and released his divine sense to envelop everyone in the courtyard. When the old man felt the other party's divine sense enveloping him, he frowned. What was this? He immediately released his divine sense to block Yu Qianzhou's divine sense. However, when he thought about how he had already agreed to cooperate with Yu Qianzhou, he gave up resisting. Who knew that when he retracted his divine sense, the scene before his eyes would suddenly change? He didn't know where he was anymore. Looking at the empty courtyard, Yu Qianzhou sneered. He turned around and headed towards the next sect. There were more than 200 sects participating in the new Excellence Assembly every year. This was a chance for some of the smaller sects to obtain the foundation building pill. The reason why the Qi refining stage disciples were allowed to compete was to reflect fairness. At this time, the disciples of the various sects were still at the starting point. There was no situation where the smaller sects would suffer too much. Yu Qianzhou walked around the courtyards of the various sects, enthusiastically serving them. He was extremely busy. Bai Suzhen and Guan Yu, who were also in Utopia, were also extremely busy. People were constantly being sent into the formation that Bai Suzhen had set up. Guan Yu and his subordinates were dumbfounded. This leader was too amazing. They didn't know what she was doing. Looking at the clothes that the people were wearing, they were obviously disciples of the various sections. They really didn't know how the leader managed to do it. It was too unbelievable. After visiting more than 100 sects, they realized that the elders and managers of the various sects who attended the banquet were gradually returning. Yu Qianzhou immediately hid in a corner and quickly changed his clothes. He was already wearing the standard hero outfit. A small black flag was stuck in the courtyard with a ding sound. Then, he mounted his sword and flew towards the seaside. The elders and managers of the various sects, as well as the elders of supporting Immortals Island who escorted them, immediately noticed this uninvited guest. Dongfang Chang Ao, who was in the crowd, shouted, "Where are you from? How dare you trespass on my supporting Immortals Island? Where do you think you're going?" His figure flashed as he quickly chased after the intruder. Chapter 241. Immediately, a few people flew after him. The people from the other sects exchanged glances. The masked man in black had come out from the courtyards of their sections. Feeling that something was wrong, they immediately fled to their sect's residences. Dongfang Chang Ao and a few others caught up in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianzhou turned his hand and scattered a yellow light. Hundreds of astral breaching talismans flew towards the people chasing after him. The expressions of Dongfang Chang Ao and the others changed. They naturally knew what those talismans were. Although they couldn't hurt them, being hit by so many astral breaching talismans would definitely not feel good. "Hi!" Dongfang Chang Ao shouted. A long sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Immediately, he slashed several times in the air. The sharp sword light collided with the astral breaching talismans. Boom! A deafening explosion sounded. After the people behind him caught up, they also slashed several times at the smoke caused by the explosions of the astral breaching talismans. Then, without stopping, they went straight through the smoke. Yu Qianzhou turned around and was shocked to see the people who went through the smoke. He didn't expect that the powerful astral breaching talismans could not stop them at all. In the blink of an eye, they had caught up again. Immediately, a large number of fire talismans were scattered, followed by a handful of smoke talismans, and then another handful of astral breaching talismans. For a moment, the sky was filled with flames. Then, white smoke filled the air. Followed by angry shouts, there was a rumbling explosion. Suddenly, a clear whistle was heard. A figure wrapped in a layer of white astral energy passed through the explosion and the smoke. It was Dongfang Chang Ao. Looking at his angry face, it was obvious that he was furious. He didn't care about anything and didn't fear an ambush. He used his strong cultivation to break through the obstacles. It seemed that he wouldn't stop until he caught the masked man in black. So powerful. Yu Qianzhou was shocked. But when he thought of his plan, he gritted his teeth and jumped towards the sea below him. There was no way Dongfang Chang Ao would let him get away so easily. The flying sword in his hand turned into a white light and shot out like lightning. When Yu Qianzhou saw this, he was almost scared out of his wits. The flying sword under his feet hurriedly shot out and he rushed towards the sea. Just as his flying sword shot out, the other party's flying sword arrived. Clang! A crisp sound. Yu Qianzhou's flying sword, infused with mystic gold sand, was split into pieces by the opponent's sword. However, it wasn't completely useless. It blocked the attack of the opponent's sword. However, the fierce attack from the sword slammed into Yu Qianzhou's back. Yu Qianzhou coughed out a mouthful of blood. He had wanted to jump into the sea of the attack, but he was hit by the attack and he fell even faster into the sea. Before Yu Qianzhou fell into the sea, a jade archive fell from his body onto the beach. With a splash, Yu Qianzhou was submerged in the sea. Dongfang Chang Ao pointed with the sword in his hand. The flying sword leaped into the air and sped up. It fiercely shot towards the location where the man in black had fallen. Bang! The seawater was blasted high into the air. After that, the few people who followed behind also madly shot their flying swords into the sea. Several flying swords rose and fell, and the sea was immediately blasted into the sky. A large number of the fish in the sea immediately died and floated up to the surface. The few of them exchanged glances. Dongfang Chang Ao nodded. They immediately took the flying swords in their hands and rushed into the sea, disappearing without a trace. Looking at their expressions, it seemed as if they wanted to see the person alive and the corpse dead. That made sense. What kind of place was supporting Immortal Island? What's more, in front of so many people from the various sects, a few tribulation passing stage elders couldn't catch a mid-stage core formation cultivator. If word got out, they would surely die of laughter. Hua hua. The few of them jumped out of the sea and floated in the air. White steam rose from their soaked clothes and evaporated them in an instant. They all shook their heads with puzzled expressions. Not only did they not find the man in black, but they didn't even find his corpse. They didn't even see a single piece of his corpse. Dongfang Chang Ao looked at the sea below him with a gloomy expression. His gaze fell on the jade archive that the man in black dropped on the beach and paused for a moment. His figure floated down to the beach and he sucked the jade archive into his hand. After he examined it with his divine sense, his expression immediately changed. From the beginning to the end, only a few moments had passed. At this moment, several hundred people rushed over from supporting Immortals Island. It was obvious that they were alarmed by the commotion caused by the battle. As soon as the several hundred people arrived, a few dozen people quickly flew in the air and looked around. The rest of the people landed on the beach. The person in the lead was the Pavilion of Cultivation's principal elder. O.C. Hai asked in a deep voice, Chang Ao, what exactly happened? Dongfang Chang Ao immediately explained what happened. After listening, O.C. Hai's expression twitched as he looked at the few people around him. He sneered and said, a few tribulation passing stage elders couldn't even catch a core formation cultivator. What a joke. Elder O, don't be angry. Let me show you something. Dongfang Chang Ao handed over the jade archive and frowned. This fell off the man's body when I knocked him into the sea. Humph. O.C. Hai snorted. It was obvious that he wasn't satisfied with Dongfang Chang Ao's performance. However, he still took the jade archive and examined it with his divine sense. After reading it, his expression also changed. He frowned and said, are you sure it fell off the man's body? I can't be wrong. Dongfang Chang Ao shook his head. The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other in surprise. They didn't know what the two of them were talking about. Could it be that there was some secret in the jade archive? While everyone was silent, a roar came from the residences of the various sects on the island. Everyone was shocked. O.C. Hai shouted, leave a few people here to continue searching. The rest of you, follow me. Immediately, except for the few people who stayed behind, everyone else flew away. The residences of the various sects were in an uproar. Many people were shouting that the supporting Xian Island was up to no good. When O.C. Hai led a few hundred people to descend from the sky, the group of people was immediately stunned. The lineup of Fuxian Island was too strong. However, there were still many people who demanded an explanation from the supporting Xian Island. Everyone, what exactly happened? O.C. Hai cupped his hands at the crowd. Immediately, someone showed him a small black flag. O.C. Hai took it and unfolded it. The word hero was embroidered on it in gold. O.C. Hai frowned deeply. He suppressed the anger in his chest and saluted the crowd. What exactly happened? Therefore, more than 100 people from the various sects talked about the disappearance of their disciples. When the people of the supporting Immortal Island heard this, their expressions changed. If this was true, then this matter was going to be huge. There were more than 100 sects, and each sect had more than 30 people. In total, there were more than 3,000 people. To think that all of them had disappeared just like that. This was simply unimaginable. Hai, who was holding the black flag, didn't rush to declare his position. Instead, he asked his people to disperse and follow the sects whose disciples had disappeared to check their residences. It didn't take long for the results to come out. It was just as the sects had said. Not only could they not find their residences, but they also couldn't find them on the entire island. They had disappeared into thin air. Moreover, there was no trace of a fight at the residences. It was really strange. Could they have run into the supporting Xian Island? This was impossible. There were always people watching this place. How could a few thousand people not see them? Everyone, please wait for a moment. I will immediately report this matter to the sect leader. I believe the sect leader will give everyone a satisfactory explanation. After Hai finished speaking, he didn't care whether the sects agreed or not. He turned around and shouted, "The rest of you stay and protect the sections. Chang Ao, follow me to see the sect leader." Two figures flew towards the Penglai pavilion. After Feng Xiangtian learned about what happened, he flew into a rage and smashed the table in front of him into pieces. He gritted his teeth and shouted in a low voice, "Hero, hero, who is this hero? How dare he offend Fuxian Island?" You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.